Minutes is right back to you.
Oh, yes, I did. Come on, phone.
No, I just used.
Good evening. I'd like to call this special called meeting slash work session regarding the budget and capital improvement projects to order. Ms. Johnson, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Kirby,
Here.
Mr. Hill,
Here.
Mr. Daniels,
Here.
Mrs. Hairston,
Here.
Mr. Holbrook,
Here.
Dr. Mealy,
Here.
Mr. Nelms.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? I have a motion by Mr. Nelms. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Holbrook. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The agenda is approved. Moving on to item 2.01, fiscal year 24 budget. Dr. Bergen?
Yep, thank you, Ms. Kirby. Board members, good to see you all again. Looking forward to talking to you about both these topics, the operating budget and CIP. We just want to hit some of the highlights that I shared when we were just together about what Mr. Hagler and I have done with the Budget and Finance Committee and the development of this preliminary budget. First of all, we consider it preliminary, meaning we fully anticipate we're going to need to make some changes because we don't know our funding yet out of Richmond. However, if there are no amendments out of Richmond, we do have the skinny budget. We know what was approved in the biennium. And so we proceeded with that as the assumption as we move forward. So I do believe funding will increase or get better. We'll be able to do more and meet more of our priorities. But with what we do know we have, we do not anticipate asking the Board of Supervisors for additional funding other than our standing agreement of $500,000 in new revenue towards the CIP. So we call it level funding from the Board of Supervisors plus $500,000 towards the CIP. And then the other increases in the budget would come from Richmond. With that as the assumption, we, as I shared last time, are able to set aside $600,000 from our operating budget towards the CIP in combination with the $500,000 that the Board of Supervisors is putting aside. That $600,000 is in addition to the $200,000 that's in the current budget. That's a total of $800,000 from the school division to their $500,000. That 1.3 combined with what has been rolling forward from the Board of Supervisors would put $3.3 million into the CIP, into the maintenance reserve fund. That's a significant amount of money, and that will increase each year by design, so that by the time we get to that 28, 29, we will not have a cliff. We will have prepared for it. Aside from that, even with the skinny budget and making that assumption of, lowest possible increase, what we anticipate is the lowest possible increase from Richmond, we're also able to do a 5% increase in compensation on average for all employees. That would include a step for all eligible employees and a COLA for all employees. I think that's what's most likely to change out of Richmond, because both the Senate and the House were shooting for 7% for all staff. But there'll be strings attached, and so we have to wait to see what the language is. Aside from that, we were also able to pick up another priority of the board and the administration, which is no parents having to pay for AP or for dual enrollment for courses offered in our buildings. Parents have been paying for AP courses, and they have been paying for 25% of dual enrollment courses, but they wouldn't pay anything next year based upon the preliminary budget we've proposed. And in alignment with our strategic plan, we're able to expand on career and workforce development. So bring back the electrical program and expand adding cybersecurity. So just more offerings for our students and college and workplace readiness. If and when more funding becomes available, and I do believe it will, we'll continue on with the other priorities identified by the board through the Budget and Finance Committee. That would include finishing the compensation study. We have we took care of a lot of employees last year, particularly our teachers and our lowest paid employees, but we have a fair number of employees that have not received the restoration steps as recommended in last year's compensation study. So that's another priority that we're looking for additional funding out of the state in order to accomplish. And we're looking to expand middle school sports with more athletic trainers so that, as we have more athletes participating, we're able to provide for them safely. So that's a recap of what I had shared with you all last week. Tonight, we do need action on two things, if only two things. We need action from the board on our staffing standards. Because no matter what our funding level is, we need to be in agreement about how we staff our schools. So we're prepared to discuss with you tonight some modifications to what we're recommending for staffing standards for next year. And Dr. Calvert is well prepared to take you through a handout, and then we can take our time answering questions about those standards. And then, of course, we want to get into the line item, into the detail of the budget. Mr. Hagler is ready to engage you all, along with members of the Budget and Finance Committee. But the only action on, other than staffing standards we need, is agreement from you all about the ask of the Board of Supervisors. Because we have to communicate something to them, that they can set the tax rate and Mr. Hiss can move forward with his budget development. We don't know the state money, we may not know for some time, but I don't anticipate to balance our budget, we need any more money from the Board of Supervisors other than our current level of funding plus $500,000 to the CIP. So if we have agreement on those two things tonight, we can continue to wait on Richmond to see what the funding looks like, and then continue to talk about other priorities and what we want to fund when we finalize the budget, because we're still at a preliminary stage. All right, so without any more ado, with the board's permission, I'd like to start with staffing standards, and then switch to the operating budget and any detailed questions you may have. Is that all right? Okay, so you all have a printed copy. It shows some red line changes of what we're recommending, and anything that's in black is already in the standards. And so Dr. Calvert, I'll hand it over to you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm gonna go over the red items that we discussed and were proposed, reviewed in the Finance Committee. The first one that you see on F is just a simple statement. The multi-grade classrooms may be necessary. While during the last few years, we have had the additional COVID money to make sure, and it's been our priority, that we have not had multi-grade level classrooms. That is really not in the staffing standard with any money provisions in order to do that. So we wanted just to make sure that you're aware that that is not in there, and that when we're unable to use COVID money to supplement, that we may need multi-grade classrooms. The next item is an additional item also because during the time where we had additional funding, we were able to supplement library and counselors. There are 4 schools that the original staffing was at 250, and there are 4 schools that fall under 250, Otter River, Huddleston, Moneta, and Big Island. And some of these are very close, like 221 out of 250. So it's like a 0.8, 0.9, close to being where you need it to be. We've been able to just round up and add that additional portion in order to give 1 full-time library media specialist to Otter River, Huddleston, Moneta. And then there's a shared position at Big Island. The person is shared between the library and counselor, and that seems to be working. So if we reduce that to 200, that would take care of what we would be supplementing. so that Otter River, Huddleston, and Manita would have full-time librarian and counselors, and that Big Island would still have that shared position. If you then turn to, and one other thing about library media are kind of an essential part of giving an elementary teacher a staff period. So there's a rotation of art, music, PE, and library that enables them to get the staff periods from those resources to elementary teachers. If you go to letter K on the third page under high school staffing standards, as we all know, students who attend early college, CBGS, RVGS, Susie Gibson, and STEM academies are not present in our base high schools all day. So we have done a slight deduction of 0.3. Most of those programs, I do believe the students are out of the building about half the day, maybe a little bit more. This is a stepping stone to have a point, so we're giving them credit for 0.7, which means we're taking out credit of 0.3 in the FTEs. This FTE deduction is allowing us to do some of the things that we had in the budget with paying for AP and some of those types of items, dual enrollment credits, that type of thing. So it is, they would be given 1 FTE for every full-time student and 0.7 FTE for every partial student that would be attending the following programs, and those programs are listed. And that is all of the suggested changes that we have to the staffing standard.
Any questions for Dr. Calvert?
For that, page 3, letter K, what's
Yes.
the impact for each high school and your head count?
The saves 7 positions. However, they would be awarded more positions this year than they were last year. So it's not for them, they're not feeling a 7 position loss from last year. JF would actually be saying the staff that's in their building currently compared to the staff they will have next year, they will lose 2.5 positions. Liberty High School would lose 0.7 positions, and Stanton River High School would still gain 1.4 positions. JF has 308 students that are in these programs. Liberty has 143 and Stanton River has 129. So that's like the net effect, if you understand, from what they have currently in building.
Can I interject real quick? How does this affect the class sizes of the kids, of the students that are not involved in these off-campus learning opportunities? Does it affect their class sizes at all?
Well, we would have fewer FTEs in the building, so it would have to affect the class size of something. It would be dependent on the school and what they would choose to reduce.
So what's our average class size of those
Our
classes now?
staffing standard class size is 25.75. That does not mean every class is 25.75, but that is what we use. There are many classes there are classes under 15, there are classes over 25.75, it's,
Depends on the class.
yes.
I think we know that we would really have to take advantage of the fact we're on the same schedule. And classes that maybe only have 4 or 5 students, we may need to combine across campuses or look at how we can provide instruction, because that's where we're putting that extra money is into those smaller classes there. So we just need to take advantage, I think, of our 7-period day and how we can teach across all 3 high schools for some of our really small classes.
I think it's a small step towards, because the students in those, they're really not there probably half a day. So they were being staffed, but those students really aren't in their buildings. So we're taking a small step towards that by saying it's 0.3,
And we're saying next year we plan to increase that.
if you would like.
Okay.
That would be a board decision.
So the library media specialist and the school counselor. So we're dropping that number in order to keep a full time of each at those 4 schools. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, if you kept the number at 250, Otter River and Huddleston would have to share a librarian and they would have to share a counselor. Well, actually, it's Otter River and Big Island and Huddleston and Manita.
Okay.
They would share a counselor and they would share a librarian, so it would be, a rotation Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, the next week flip-flop. So they would never, which is difficult for librarians because of that gives a staff period to your teachers, or it's one of the rotations that gives a staff period, so it's very difficult when they only have a half-day librarian, and then the counseling, it's difficult when they're not in the buildings.
We've been making them whole with COVID money, Marcus, and we're trying to wean off of COVID. So this is sustainable.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, this is sustainable, so we built it into the operating budget by reducing that number to 200 from 250. The only school that would not have full-time would be Big Island. They have 150 kids. But we have an employee who's uniquely able to satisfy the counseling and the library media role, and would continue to do so. Every other school would have full-time library media as they do now.
So Otter River has 200 kids. What about a Forest Elementary or a Thomas Jefferson or a Goodview that has 400 and 500 kids?
They have one librarian and one counselor.
So we're doing one librarian for 500 kids, and then we're gonna supplement one librarian for less than 200 kids.
If you don't want to, I mean, that's our
It's not
recommendation.
that I don't want to, I'm just asking a question, I wanna make sure I understand.
Do the other schools need more? Probably, yes.
Okay, so, and that's where I was going, so if we're saying there's a standard per kid, then why would we not do half and half and then put another FTE at the larger schools? I'm not saying that's what I wanna do.
Yeah,
But
so
if you're telling me that based on the number of kids, you need to have X number of librarians,
the state of Virginia doesn't recognize one librarian, one counselor per school. They have it per kid. We far exceed the state of Virginia on most of all of these standards. So we're having to find local dollars to, if, we're stretched to do this. If we were to say, gosh, we need to have 1.5 at the larger schools, we have to find the funding where it's not in the SOQ, it's not in the state funding. Unless, we get more funding because of, as they negotiate in Richmond, all this is tied into the support cap. Librarians, counselors, APs, reading specialists, teacher assistants, there's a ton of employees that we don't get state money for because they fall under the support cap. The Senate is saying, lift the support cap, we could revisit this conversation if we had sustainable state funding to do so.
I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I guess my concern is that we're taking away from the larger schools to make sure that there's a full-time at the smaller schools. And if there's a reason why you can tell me it's justified, that's fine. I just wanna understand, it's almost like we're taking away from one to satisfy the other. And I'm hearing mixed messages of why it's important.
Yes, anyone who's been here longer than me could correct me, but I don't think we've had more than one media specialist or one school counselor at any elementary school ever. So we actually increased the resources at these smaller schools for library and for counselors. We were able to do so the last 2 years with COVID money. Now we're trying to build into the operating budget. But if you go back 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you've seen part-time media specialists and part-time counselors at these small schools. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I remember when we shared librarians between our smaller schools, because there are days that the library is shut down. It's also not as much even about having the number of kids, but it's running 2 full libraries and those collections and making sure, that they're there to check out books, take books back. And we ended up during that time adding a para to every small school so that the libraries could be open at all times, which was almost counterintuitive because we went back and added positions. And I think, again, in thinking about giving teachers that planning time, the librarians are part of that rotation. And then on the counselor side of it, you can't predict when a child might need a counselor, or you might have to do a risk assessment or a threat assessment. So I think that's why we've felt like having full-time staff in those buildings is really important. I 100% get, we've kind of gone back and forth about how do we make it all work, and it's not the perfect solution, but I think it's our attempt to recognize it's really hard for a librarian to be at 2 schools, and it's really hard for a counselor to be at 2 schools, and for the schools not to have that support full-time.
They were struggling with trying to figure out how to get their teachers.
Planning time.
Can I piggyback off of what you were saying, the sharing thing? The Big Island Elementary, where is that position being shared with?
It's not. It's
It's,
within the building.
it's the person
Same
that is
person does
half
both.
half.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, that person's just uniquely Right. qualified to have both of those
Very dual.
things. And it's working in that school right now. But the counselors, I would say, are really important because, I'm just gonna back up what Dr. Woodford says. You just have no idea when one is gonna be needed, and when they're needed and not there, typically those situations disintegrate into situations that didn't have to be as significant as they might have been, could have been if a counselor had been there. And today with the kids, more and more kids bringing more and more issues to school, that's something I think is very necessary, even for a small school.
I had a question about the multi-grade classrooms. Like, is that something we've done before or?
Combo classes.
It is.
It's not our go-to, Matt, but when I was, my first year, different board, some of the same members, but different members were very clear with me. Very clear. No multi-grade classrooms. So we've not had multi-grade classrooms for the last 2 years. It's expensive, very expensive. These
So do you have
smallest, these same smaller schools, what happens is you've got, you have not enough kids for 2 sections, but too many kids for 1 section at 2 different grade levels. So if you could combine some kindergarten and some first grade kids together, so you have 1 kindergarten section, 1 first grade section, 1 combo K1, as an example. Could be a 2-3 combo or 4-5 combo. Then we can have the same size classes throughout the building. But if we're insistent that we're not gonna do multi-grade, and we're insistent that, 25 is too many kids and we have to add teachers, we've run those numbers for you, and it's like
That was that
$900,000 a
presentation
year.
I did earlier in the year, and just for the one, I think that was in the middle, that was kind of like to say there's no multi-grade classrooms and to say no single elementary class would be greater than 25 in K5 was $804,000, because this year it would have taken 12 teachers. I mean,
So,
But again, it's not what you're going to, it's not gonna be your go-to,
No,
but
sir.
it's a backup if we need
Last
to.
resort.
So we avoid like Otter River this year with that.
yes, sir. Yeah,
We
it's not
have-
our go-to. It's
Okay.
just, we have, if we're just, insistent that we have to have no combination, we could easily spend almost $1 million. Because the smaller the school, the harder it is to staff. You don't have as many places to break the kids up. So,
we had
but we wouldn't
three
do it as a go-to. We'd do it if we had to, so we could equalize class sizes.
So it's the same teacher though, one teacher.
Yeah.
in the, per class.
But let me say, I did that because that was not,
case.
it was the case when I was a principal. And in my opinion, both grade levels get the shaft. I mean, if you're supposed to be teaching reading 2 hours a day, then you teach it 2 hours a day, math an hour a day. Now, people will say, well, you can combine things and you can, what's learned in one grade level could, you could also do it in another grade level. Well, you can to a certain extent,
Well,
but
there wouldn't be
not-
grade levels if that was the
Exactly,
case.
so it's
Yeah, I
not,
get what
it
you're
is definitely not best for teachers, it's definitely not best for students. I think it doesn't give them the best education we could provide. It gives them an education, certainly not the best. And there are a lot of things that can't be combined. I mean, math is a progressive subject, so what you learn in first grade kind of takes you over to second grade.
Right.
There's not a whole lot, there are some things, but not a whole lot that you can transfer and do with the whole class.
Right.
So generally what happens, even if you put like a para in there, I mean, we tried all sorts of things. There are certain parts of the year where the material is just difficult. You need that whole hour in math to do that, and it's not always possible. So I understand it's a go-to, it's just really not a good go-to.
And I've seen it work. I mean, 3rd and 4th grade, where you've got accelerated 3rd graders who fit right into that
Yeah,
4th grade
it's got its
class.
pros and cons.
It's got its pros and cons,
Yeah.
so I do think it's nice to have as an
It's an
option.
option maybe,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we
Our,
just
our
put,
point was, it wasn't listed, so either I'd like a statement that says it can be optional or it shall not occur, because it wasn't listed either way in the standards. So I just wanna know some direction from the board, I'll accept whatever direction you wanna go.
Okay, Ms. Harrison had something to say.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kirby. Otter River was one of the school, while I was principal there, that was asked or directed to have a multi-grade class. And I can tell you firsthand, the staff was fabulous. We rallied together and we made it work. But I want you to know that those students, with all of the hard work and the efforts made by the teachers and the staff, they suffered. And we saw that later in their 3rd grade, when it came time for those children in 4th grade to take the SOL test. Now, that was no fault of the teachers, because they worked extremely hard. But when you have such various instructional level that these children are on, it becomes nearly impossible for a teacher to really meet their needs. So I can say to you that if we go to this multi-grade classroom, I hope that it'll never be necessary. We're taking a step back. We are not moving forward, we're going back. And it will be detrimental to our students. I've seen it firsthand. We put the best teachers there, working hard, but they're planning for 2 grade levels. 2 grade levels with such various instructional ability level among these children. It was really hard. I hope that the board will not allow multi-grade classrooms to ever come back in our school division.
And I kind of want to echo off of what you just said, Ms. Harrison. I'm, with a couple of years difference, I'm the most senior member of this board, and I can remember parents coming before us, begging for us to do away with the multi-grade level classes. And the day that we got rid of those was probably one of the best days for our education system within our county. And you said yourself, Dr. Bergen, that there were some that were animately opposed, and I will remain animately opposed to it.
Yes, ma'am, and I just wanna reemphasize, the board adopts staffing standards, and we don't have a statement in either direction. So I would simply ask for direction for, they may be necessary and may be used when needed, or they may never be implemented. So we put it in our standard, that's all I'm asking for.
I'll make one more statement. To me, we've got to give our staff tools, and they've heard that it's not the preferable. But we also heard feedback this year of parents being upset that there were 30 kids in a second grade classroom or third grade classroom. And so if we had that option, then we can decrease the number of students in a particular class and have that dual enrollment. So it is a tool, and I think we need to give them a tool.
If you were to do something like that, what would be the optimal way that it could work? I'm looking at you guys to say, you know, Marcus had brought up that if you had advanced, you know, third graders with fourth graders, what would be the optimal way that would work?
Well, I think in what I saw when we have multi-grade classrooms, I think you can't really do it with a kindergarten class because you don't know those kindergartners coming in. It really is looking at the students you know and you have data on, and you're trying to put your highest students in that lower grade level with your students at or below grade level and the one beside them. You know, I think other things to think about is doing some rotations. And, you know, we think about elementary and I can defer to Mrs. Harrison and Dr. Milley because they actually had it in their schools. I never as a principal had that, but I think being a little creative and having some rotations where maybe I'm a reading teacher, but I teach kids kindergarten reading and first grade reading, or first grade and second grade reading, and then maybe they go to another teacher, and then they're together for resource classes, they're together for library. These are also the same schools we're asking to put full-time counselors and librarians in, and I think there also has to be some creative use of that extra staffing there to support classrooms. And I think that's something that we didn't necessarily do, maybe when that could have been essential. I do think it's important, if you're gonna do it, to make sure they have enough instructional para support. You know, there has to be a little bit of a balance.
That was gonna be my next question, because if they're able to have that full-time that's in that building, would they be spending a lot of the time in that combined classroom?
Yes.
Yeah. Because you wanna go with smaller groups and rotations and,
Yeah.
okay.
And you know, you're always balancing out. If you have a small school and you break down grade levels, you might have 11 or 12 in a class compared to a larger school that has 24 in that same grade level. So it's no perfect staffing, you know, situation in some cases, but it does take more staff in a smaller school if you're going to break it down like that. And if the board says no multi-grade classrooms, you know, we'll figure that out, we'll need more money. If you say we do, then our instructional staff would just really have to go in and work with scheduling and thinking about how do we support those teachers.
Madam Chairman.
Can I ask just a question? Something you said just doesn't add up to me, and would you explain what you just said about if we did have the multi-grade classrooms, classroom size would be smaller?
Yeah.
How could it be smaller if you're combining two classes into one classroom?
Well, because like this year, you had 30 in 30 second grade classes, we didn't add a teacher, and then the third grade classes were smaller than that 30. So you would be able to shift some of those kids from the second grade
Okay.
to make it a more,
You balance it out.
Balance.
you're just
More
balancing it out.
average.
Okay, I'm understanding what, it wasn't registering with me. Thank you for explaining, Dr. Maley.
And you can do that, but typically, and maybe you had different experience, you end up with still a goodly number of kids. It's not like you have a class of 15.
Right.
You know, when you're combining those. Now, we did, you know, send them to resource time, and we used our reading specialists, but still, it's the continuity of that time, 30 minutes here and 15 minutes there is not a good learning environment. But you could look at the higher performing students, the gifted children, but typically you don't have a lot of them, especially in elementary school. You might have a couple in a grade level, so they really don't help in terms of numbers. And I guess too, what I would ask everybody to consider, and, you know, I may answer it differently than you do, and that's okay. You know, would that be okay for your child? Would you be okay if we said to you, your children are gonna be in a multi-grade level class, and that's a personal decision. It wouldn't be for me, I would not want my child in that situation, but you may think it's okay, because if it's not okay for me, I always felt like it wouldn't be okay for some, you know, why should I do that to somebody else?
And I would like to say, our other four, so we have 4 small schools that this would possibly affect. 3 of them are Title I schools. So they already use their Title I money to add teachers to lower their class sizes in the hopes that they can bring their reading and math scores up. Otter River is an anomaly because it's not a Title I school, so there are no extra dollars for the principal to use to allocate towards staffing. But in all of our other small schools and even in our larger schools, Title I dollars are paying for teachers that are over and above what we would give them in the staffing standards so that they can make smaller class sizes. So that's another advantage that our Stanton River Zone and Liberty Zone elementary schools have because they have Title I federal dollars.
But we have to balance that with,
Right.
we can't supplant.
Yes.
So if our expectation is because Huddleston, Manita, and Big Island have title dollars that they can use to take care of this, and then we locally allocate additional teachers to a non-Title I school, that's supplanting, and it's illegal.
Yes.
So if we're going to give extra teachers to a non-title school, we have to give extra teachers to the title schools as well.
Right, yes.
So that's just the way it is, so.
Yes, thank you. I was just trying to, I think that's why we hear more about it from Otter River because we are applying the same standard, but they don't have the Title I dollars.
Right.
You're absolutely right though. We'd have to change the whole standard.
I understand what you're saying.
I'm done with questions, but I don't want to approve the staffing standards until we talk about the budget, because I wanna make sure the staff is, I mean, because if we change something here and then we've approved the 200,
Okay.
it could affect it. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm fine with that. Any more questions about staffing standards before we move on? Okay. So we'll put this aside for now.
All right, so you've received a number of handouts from Mr. Hagler. And the Budget and Finance Committee has seen this information at a deeper level. They can also assist with some questions and leading the discussion. So why don't we start with, Randy, do you want to kick off anything or just go right into questions?
We
You wanna walk
go
through the
down the list or
handouts?
kick off questions. I'll just say this, we put this sheet together, I think we had a nice glossy binder. We will put that together at the end of the, once we get a final budget. Just the production cost of all that and changing everything out. Just so the community can go through how's the budget built, what's the process, and a lot of graphs and nice data, and that we'll produce when we have a final budget. But this is really, in the years that I've been here, kind of guiding people, what's changing from last year's budget? What are the big changes and for each of the funds? And so I put this document together, hopefully as a very simple one page for the board members and the community to say, what's the change year over year, and what are we looking at? So with that, board wants to go down each one of these line items or just have questions, be happy to do that, or any of the other staff that, if that pertains to their area can answer.
Just
You
go
want to
down,
walk it through this, or have you had a chance to look at it on your own?
Can we go down?
just go down the list, wouldn't you?
Okay.
I'd like to hear the list.
The first one, salaries. State, budget last year, had in a 5% increase. That's where Dr. Bergen would have to certify 5% increase for SOQ, Standards of Quality, positions on average. So the way we put that together is they're on average about 1.35% increase in steps. Not exact across the board, but on average. Then 3.65 is the COLA that would apply across all salary scales, substitutes, coaches, remediation, it applies to everything. And so that's the cost of living adjustment. So that's the $4 million there. If we were not to do the 5% and could not certify that, then we would have to tell the state we're leaving money on the table. So I mean, you've got to match, and we have to actually sign a document saying on average we gave 5%. If you recall last year, we were implementing a salary study And so some didn't quite get 5%, but a lot got more than that, and it averaged out to above 5%, so we were able to certify that. And it's really for SOQ positions, so if they identify a position as SOQ, those have to be included in when you're given the 5%.
So, sorry.
Yes.
So the 5% is only required for SOQ positions.
Yes, sir.
All right, and you said the SOQ positions have to be an average. So it doesn't mean that every single person has to get a 5%. It just means that the average
Yes, sir.
must be 5%.
Yep.
All right, so can you, the SOQ positions, can you tell me what's not included in SOQ?
I'll try my best. Under the support cap, as Dr. Bergen was mentioning before, there's positions. I'm gonna go down what I know that's in the SOQ, where it specifically lists things.
All right, wait a minute, so you're going over what's in
I'm gonna go what's in the SOQ. Principals are in the SOQ, assistant principals, counselors.
Can we tell you how many?
Well, not how many, I'm just listing the
Okay.
positions. Principals, assistant principals, librarians, counselors, teachers, of course, aides for kindergarten,
And only kindergarten, and special education,
special education's kind of,
separate.
they're separate, it's based upon caseload.
I've got it here, Randy.
You've got it there, thank you.
School social workers, school psychologists, school nurses, behavior analyst, licensed health and behavioral positions, clerical, and additional clerical in the library for, high schools at a certain level. The ITC, the instructional technology teachers, and elementary resource teachers, art, music, and PE. And I think Randy
I think reading
got the
specialists
other,
are
I
in
think
there too.
there's, oh yes, reading specialist, sorry, that was on the page before that, yes. Reading specialist, ELA teachers, special education, gifted, and career technical education teachers. And those are the big categories.
But, you know, I referenced it earlier, I'll just use media specialists as an example. The SOQs say we have to have one per so many hundreds of children across a division. It doesn't say by school, it's by division. So we far exceeded. So what's in the SOQ, a lot of our library media specialists are outside of the SOQ. So, but we're not gonna say, okay, you 5 are in the SOQ and you're not, so you're getting 5% and you're not. They all get 5%. That's true of teachers, we far exceed the SOQs on teachers. Principals, assistant principals, that entire list that Karen just read, we exceed every SOQ in Pembroke County. So a lot of those employees fit within the SOQ as defined by the Commonwealth. A number of them do not. There are very few positions, though, Mark, I think your question is what positions are not SOQ funded? I don't think school resource officers are defined in the SOQs.
Bus drivers, custodians. Nutrition.
I don't think the chief financial officer is listed in the SOQs, you know, or most central positions. They all fall under the support cap. Most of our clerical staff fall under the support cap. Custodians fall under the support cap. Maintenance workers fall under the support cap. So the more we can get those positions, we can lift it, as you and I have talked with Senator Newman about lifting the support cap, we get more employees in under the SOQs. We get more funding for those positions, recurring annual funding from the state for those positions.
So here's where I just, so let me just use this as an example. Let's just say there's, based on SOQ standards, we have to have, and I'm just using loose numbers, 10 teachers, okay? But we have 15. We only have to hit 5% based on 10 teachers, the money-wise, is that right? Or do you have to say all 15 have to have a 15% or a 5% increase? Or is it just based on the SOQ standard?
Well, Randy, we're asked to certify on, I'd love to answer your question directly. It's an on average, so we don't have to say 10 did and 5 didn't. We have to say on average, the 15 got a 5% increase.
So we're only getting money for whatever the state's standards are,
Right,
Yes.
but we're giving more than what we're getting.
exactly.
Correct, yes. Well, I'll use Marcus's 10 and 5 example, right? So we're gonna get state funding, not for the whole 5% raise, but we're getting a state contribution towards the 5% for the 10. We have a local match required. The 5 that fall outside of it, we have to come up with the funding for the whole 5%. I'm oversimplifying, Randy, but I think that's technically accurate.
And on the 10, we don't get 100% from the
Right.
state. It's based upon your LCI and how much you're getting on that. So you're not even getting 100% on the 10. But the 5 is 100% lift on the locality. Yes.
And what is isn't it like we're anticipating 2.3 from the state or 2.7 from the state? We'd have to match with 2.3, something like that? Do you remember?
Percentage or dollars?
Dollars. Dollars we'd leave on the table if we chose not to do that.
You look at the worksheet. If you didn't give anything,
Right.
let me look at the worksheet I've got.
Well, Randy's looking for that. When, not this current legislature, but the one before, passed a 2-year biennium budget that said a 10% raise over 2 years for all staff. And so all localities, including us, got the first half of that, the 5% last year, we gotta get the second half this year. So there was money allocated to do that. So that, to your question, Susan, it's a 3.3% increase in state funding in the second year of the biennium, and the lion's share of that is going to these salaries.
Salaries,
So if we don't meet if we can't certify the lion's share of the 3.3, we would lose some of that funding. But we're not going to, I can't imagine the board's gonna say, don't give a 5% raise on average. Well, I don't know, like that's why we have a work session. I wouldn't wanna leave money on the table, but I guess that's a discussion.
I'm gonna make a statement. We have gotta get away, and I'm not saying I'm not willing to do the 5%. But we have gotta get away from this thought process of blanket increases. And you guys sitting at this table, you're the executive team. To me, I'm gonna be looking at results. And if we're not hitting results, I have a very hard time of handing you an additional 5% increase. And that's why I'm asking the question of, is it for everybody or is it an average? Because if I can go hit our 5% or whatever bogey number we're trying to hit, and I'm not saying take away from the teachers, I'm not saying take away from the nurses, I'm saying we gotta get away from here's 5% and just throwing it out there and we're not hitting numbers. That, to me, that's a concern. Where we just keep falling shorter and shorter, and we keep going, oh, here's 5 more percent, here's 5 more percent. And maybe that's the way things work, but I have a concern with that. And that's why I'm asking the questions. I'm not saying I wanna change anything tonight or on this budget, but I do wanna understand how those numbers work. I know there's been some concerns when I asked about it last week about, our principals, and I'm not trying to take away, but I wanna make sure we understand that we should not be rewarding if we are not hitting standards.
I will add on to that. I think that, my opinion is that if we give a raise, it goes to everybody. But to your point, if we're not hitting numbers, that's also a passionate concern of mine, our numbers and how our students are performing, then that becomes a plan of improvement or dismissal. I mean, if the teacher or whoever it is isn't doing what they need to do, then there's a process to go through, but I wouldn't start punishing other people, I mean, and I think too, we would necessarily have to give them time to improve, as anyone else would be given time, as you would be given time in your job to improve.
If I'm on an improvement plan, I promise you I'm not getting a 5% pay increase.
Well, and I think you also have to keep in mind too, remember, the the employees, a large portion of the employees we have now went years without anything.
Well, I understand, and again, I said very specifically, I'm not trying to put teachers, nurses, school counselors, anybody, I'm looking at our executive team. That's my concern of where are we at in numbers? Where are we meeting the mark? Based on what you guys are telling me, no, we're not. And so I have a hard time to go and say, here's 5%. I'm only one of 7, but I'm putting it out there to ask the question, how does that money go, how does it equalize? And I hear you say everybody gets a blanket 5%. I just don't think that's the right answer. Now, we're certainly not gonna leave money on the table. I don't think we should do that, but as a board, I think we owe it to our taxpayers to say, who are we holding accountable? What, if we go and just say, here's 5%, we're just handing out free money and there's no accountability. Not saying, again, I'm only one of 7, it's just a concern to me that we're doing a blanket 5%. And I'd like to know what those options are.
And I hear what you're saying, but I think to say everything falls on the executive team is unfair. I can only provide for teachers as a director, as a deputy superintendent, as a superintendent. Then it becomes our system of evaluation to determine whether or not that person is a person we want to reemploy. But if I've done everything that I can do, I mean, people just choose to say, no, I'm not doing that. Yes, I will, that'd be fine. Yeah, I'm not doing any of that after they leave. That's not the fault of the person, the principal or the assistant principal or anybody on the executive team. I think that's gonna be hard to, because you just said, if I understood you, I'm not talking about teachers. Well, I think that's a really difficult thing because everybody needs to be accountable. I mean, that's how I ran Stewartsville. Everyone had to be accountable. But then there came a point in time when it became me looking at someone that maybe wasn't, doing an improvement plan, trying to, change that person. But if I couldn't change that person with everything they did, then that wasn't my fault, Then it became, okay, do I need to reemploy this person? So I still should get my 5%. If I can prove that I've done everything I need to do.
Well, I agree with both of some of those points. But I would say, the blanket of 5%, I don't agree with. I don't know if there's a way we can look at them, everybody a little closer individually. I'm sure it is, whether it go by SOL scores or whatever, where some teachers, because it is results. And sometimes that you may have tried as hard as you can, but sometimes that's just not good enough. That's just a fact. It sounds hateful, but it's just kind of how it is. I don't, I've had people work for me that they tried like hell, but I didn't give them a raise because they tried. It has to, you've got to produce and and that would give incentive, I think. That's just my opinion.
But there's a lot of things teachers and our executive staff can't control. I can't control when this kid comes to school and he's out of control because mom and dad might have been divorcing or they were sleeping in a car or 100 other things. The employee that doesn't do the job for you, well, you can clearly see he's not doing the job and you have the luxury of doing that. I've still got to have this child in my class no matter what they bring to school. And that's gonna impact their learning. That's why, that's why the IDS people have been such a boon to us because they're trying to help these kids so that they can be regulated enough so that we can get results. But you can have the finest teacher in the world. You really can, who does everything correctly. But you're still gonna have kids that don't succeed, and that is not necessarily their fault because people come with a lot of baggage. Our kids are coming to school with a lot of baggage, and sometimes you can't fix that when they're so deregulated. And, I just don't think that's something, I think each case is gonna be unique. You're talking about looking at each teacher and each child before you say you can't get that raise.
Ms. Harrison?
So Marcus, if you could just help walk me through again your thought processes in terms of the executive team and those individuals not perhaps receiving the 5% or the increase. So what would be your measurement? I mean, what would be your evaluation? And what would that look like?
I think that's something that we would have to determine. That's why I'm just asking the questions. So, I'll go a little bit deeper. I asked the question on Thursday night, the median income for Bedford County is $70,000. So I asked for a list of employees who made $70,000 plus, just to take a look at that overall. Well, I think there's still some employees that we haven't met the employee study increases on, is that right? In some categories?
Sure.
So here's my concern. We've got 108 people in our school division that are making over the median income in Bedford County. That's not a problem. That's good. It's based on their job steps, their experience. However, if I've got a group of employees over here where I could take $40,000 to get them caught up on steps and their increases where they should be, but yet I'm spending that $40,000 to give to executives who may be in the 150s. That's my concern. If we're way above the state standard in Bedford County, I don't have a problem with that. But I'm not seeing that when it comes to numbers. And that is not anything negative to anybody in this room. I'm just simply asking the questions. And I know Dr. Calvert's looking at me like, well, I'm taking it personally. I get it, but I want people to understand I have a problem just doing a blanket 5% when I'm looking at other employees that we keep saying, maybe one day, maybe one day, maybe one day, but yet I'm handing out 5% to our top 108 people.
And maybe that
Well,
doesn't
it's-
mean that people don't get the step increase.
No, that's right.
I mean, maybe you'd look at what that extra COLA would be and take a look at that and say, well, it's more beneficial for someone making 40 or 50 than maybe someone making 100 or something like that. I mean, I'm just spitballing that.
So, Georgia, I don't know if that answered your question, but I mean, I
Not
don't
quite,
have the
but
standard yet,
I'm
but
trying to process
I
your
just wanna-
rationale for it. It would seem to me that if the board goes in that direction, that there would need to be involvement on the board's part. And it's been my understanding from my time here on this board that it's very important that we watch that line that is drawn in terms of the executive team's duties and responsibility versus us getting over into their lanes. We've got to be careful with that.
there's one caveat to that.
Oh, okay, maybe you can
We control
educate.
the budget.
Well,
And again, I'm not implementing anything. I'm just trying to have conversations.
oh, and
when I see,
we are.
you know,
We're- I'm
those
trying to
pluses.
understand your rationale for it, and I'm processing it, and so I'm thinking if we were to take those steps, then there would need to be some sort of evaluation that the board would have to be involved in with the executive team. And then that appears to me that we're crossing our line of duty, in doing that.
Well, and again, I'm not saying we do it this year, but I think it's valid conversation to say, hey, we really need to look at the way we're doing blanket increases. I look at, we have the same number of students this year as we did last year, and yet we're increasing the budget. So we need to be asking those questions. So sometimes we're down, but we're not adding thousands of students, but yet our budget continues to go up. Now, I get it, we keep getting told, you have to increase, but I just wanna make sure we're all looking at that as a board before we just say, yep, this is good, it makes sense. I just wanna make sure we understand our dollars.
Absolutely. We certainly owe that to our community to understand our dollars. Certainly.
So, just one quick response. Yeah, the budget is increasing. 85% of our budget's in salaries and benefits. Our budget's increasing, but we're putting $3.3 million aside, not in salaries and budgets, we're putting aside into a reversion plan. So any increase Beyond that is to what this first item that we've been talking about, which is a COLA for all employees and first step for those who are eligible. Which I think all employers are trying to do as they can for all of their employees, given a cost of living adjustment, given
I
what
think the
people.
only people getting COLAs are government employees, to be, I think that's kind of what Marcus is kind of stating here is, I
Okay.
mean, I don't know.
Okay.
Not many places get
Okay.
it, you know, and, you know, just because the money's there, and I get it, like you're saying, they require you to do some of it. You know, the 5%, right? Is that what you're saying, the state?
On average.
Sure.
On average, and that's what I
Every
want to
single
understand with
year.
the SOQ requirements. That's why I started the conversation.
Okay, Dr. Mealy?
I just want us all to, as we're entering into this conversation, and I understand it is a conversation, but think about this as well. There are a couple of things. Number one, when you go to college, okay, in an undergraduate degree, whatever your chosen field is, you expect that you're gonna earn, X amount of dollars. When you earn an advanced degree, there's also the expectation that you're gonna earn more money. And when you talk about median income, it really doesn't apply as much to schools as it does to perhaps other areas of employment because it's market driven, okay? We can't say we think a teacher is worth, or any employee, pick one area, is worth X amount of dollars because it all depends on what other divisions are paying. That's why we do a salary study. We want to know, are we competitive? Because we talk about that a lot. We have to be competitive. And we've spent the last, I'd say, since I've been in Bedford County, say 12 or 13 years, trying to become competitive. Because if you're not, your teachers are gonna, the pre-service people are gonna be your teachers in programs right now are gonna be looking, saying, well, I can make $50,000 in Bedford, or I can go to Roanoke County, make $60,000. So it's not just median income for the county, it's what the market's gonna bear and what allows us to be competitive, so we get the best teachers and not ones that aren't as good. It's like having a doctor, I want the best doctor I can get, not one that maybe was at the bottom of their class.
Right.
So I think we just need to remember that too, that it's a market-driven issue.
I'm just picking your brain. So basically what you're saying is what they used to call old school merit evaluation, merit raise, as opposed to just an out and out raise.
No, I'm just I wanted to understand the
Oh,
SOQs.
but I mean, is that potentially, are you talking full merit or partial merit and still allow for some COLA or?
Absolutely. I mean, again, I just want to make sure if I'm handing out 5% blankets to an executive team, I feel like we need to be hitting numbers.
And I understand, and that's why I'm
And that's up for
just.
discussion of how we go and say, here's what you get as far as percentages or whatever. And I'm not saying we don't do the 5%. I want to make sure we understand the dollars that we're getting and where they're going. We haven't even got to the other parts
I know, trust me.
of questions that we have of, our biggest thing around this table should be, instruction and student performance. And I just want to understand where those dollars are and what we're doing with it. And are we shifting money and putting money in the right location? It's your budget, so I'm hoping you can say, yeah, this is what we're doing with it. I'm just simply asking questions.
Yeah, and I get it, I was just, you know me, I just like simplified
Yeah.
forms of kind of what you're envisioning, that's all I was asking.
I think it's important for the community to understand too, that our requirements around SOQs, and then we have other employees that you can't say, well, we're only giving SOQs, but not this, or, there needs to be an understanding and oh, by the way, SOQs, it's great when the governor stands on the stage and says everybody's getting a 5% increase. Well, we only get a certain percentage from them, and then we've got to find it elsewhere to pay for it. So
Yeah, and I
those
get it,
conversations
yeah,
is
I
what I'm
get it.
trying to
Yeah,
drive.
I get it totally, okay. Any other?
Do you want to continue to go line by line on this
Yes,
first?
please.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, the next one. Removing the bonus, there was a bonus in the 23 budget. where the state gave us money, and then that was the $1,000 bonus that employees received, I believe, in December. And so that's not in the state budget this year, so I would remove the revenue that we were receiving from the state, which was around 900,000, the actual bonus for all employees, because what we were just talking about, they don't recognize all of our employees, was 1.6. So removing 1.6 of expenditures, but the overall revenue from the state went down by about 900,000. So that helped us balance the overall budget this year. Not that we wouldn't have liked another bonus for everybody, but you know, your revenue's going down less than your expenditures there to balance. Now there, I will say one of either the House or the Senate had a bonus in theirs, one did not. They're negotiating. We'll see what the final state budget looks like. So we might have to revisit this if a bonus makes it into the final state. Once again, you'd have to match that and find money, and so, every locality, if that happens, is like, where are we gonna get the matching money for to do that? So that's a lift that may have to be looked at, or maybe said, no, we can't do it this year, so.
You know about an estimated number on what that would be?
No, because they've changed up the kind of metric, let me see here.
Just a ballpark figure.
The governor had a percentage-based one, and then they switched it to a flat number. I think the Senate had about $1 million in its budget. The House did not have anything for a bonus. And I think the Senate went back to $1,000. So once again, it would be one, if we were gonna do it, we'd get $1,000 from the state, but we'd have to find 600 for all employees, once again, instead of just SOQ. So we'll see what happens with that on the final budget. Any questions on that one? Okay. There were a couple central office reductions, kind of broke those out to balance the overall budget, so money being shifted away from central office to balance the overall budget, and those are permanent reductions there.
Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Egler, can you tell us what positions those two areas of reductions on?
Chief Operating Officer and Karen, what was the other one?
12-month lead teacher.
Lead
12-month
teacher.
teacher.
Okay.
All right. Moving down, position adjustments. So we go back and recalculate based upon enrollment. Some schools go up, some schools down on teachers and overall, all the staffing standards. So I go back and apply the staffing standards as they're written, and then I make adjustments. And so when I first did my first cut, before we made these adjustments, we would have gone down 4 positions overall. Once again, that's applying the staffing standards before the recommended adjustments. And then we come back and those recommended adjustments are really in the technical down below. If they stay in, would come back in. So I like to show it both ways. They came out and then some of them are coming back in. So if the board makes a decision either way, I can go back and unwind either one or leave it in as is. So there were minus 4 positions. Overall, almost, I think it was just, we were down 1 teacher overall across the division. We're down 23 kids. Some schools gained a teacher, some lost, depending on how their numbers were coming in. But overall, net was down 1 across the division on teachers. I do that each year. So Mr. Hill, I guess, when we apply the staffing standards, one of the first steps I do is I try to true everything up to actual. I look at December, year to date, halfway through, I start making adjustments. We typically have turnover savings. People that are retiring or leaving at the top end, you know, you're gonna rehire probably 1 through 7 steps usually. We use an average on that, so I capture that the year after. So I actually see the actual results and then actual results from this year, and then I build in savings for the following year. I wait for it to materialize rather than anticipating it, but usually you'll have a turnover savings on that just because of salary turnover. Hard to tell how much that is each and every year, typically around 300 to 400,000 sometimes. If no one retires, then you're not gonna have any. So, and then also I take the staffing standards and I build off Mark Blankenship's projections, type them in as the standards are, and then I start making adjustments to the budget for how the staffing standards are written right now. So that's my starting place for the budget, is to true up actual what's happening with fuel, electrical, and a lot of the things that we're projecting there, and making sure we have those nailed down tight. And then also looking at the staffing standards, because that's part of the overall budget the board approves, and then also making adjustments for true salaries.
So these positions, it's not actually for, it's FTE. of four.
FTE.
Okay, I just wanted.
We call them FTEs, full-time equivalent. Yep.
Okay.
And it's just not a big number because of overall, we didn't go down that much in enrollment this year.
So, but this doesn't reflect what was talked about
No,
here.
those come back in under the technical adjustments down below, that if those stay in, then they would come in under that number down below.
Okay, thank you.
I like to reflect what would happen if not. Federal grants, typically, I mean, it's a little bit off, but usually federal grants and on the revenue side and the expenditure side go up and down. It's usually, it's just a zero net game on there. There's like a $10,000 adjustment there because the expenditures weren't nailed down exactly last year. But as federal grants revenue goes up or down, expenditures go up and down, it really has no impact on the bottom line. The big decrease you're seeing there is taking a lot of COVID dollars out of the budget. There's still COVID dollars left in for next year, learning loss, but it's taking quite a bit out that we had before. We're leaving about $600,000 in operating to deal with learning loss that Dr. Woodford and her team would allocate out. We have to spend money on learning loss, so we need to leave that money in there. But quite a bit of it is coming out. So we're kind of making that soft landing. We've been scaling down as we've been going along, so it's just, doesn't all disappear at one time in our operating fund. And so that's why you're seeing the bigger decrease on the federal side. Yes, sir.
Okay, so you said we lost learning loss, but Dr. Woodford has to continue to work on learning loss.
All
So-
school divisions,
What's that?
all school divisions, yes.
Well, I mean, we're talking about us
Yes,
though.
yes.
So my question is, how much did we lose, but how much are we having to spend per guidelines?
We have to spend at least 20% of the COVID money on learning loss. So we've done HVAC projects, we've done cleaning supplies, we've done things over the whole time frame.
So we didn't lose any money, we're just.
No, sir. We're spending it down, and I think 2 years ago, we were like, okay, if we had 3 million in the operating fund, everybody gets used to that 3 million in the extra positions. You can't support that. So we were like at 24 positions 2 years ago. This year, I think it was 6 or 7 next year, because the schools will say, where do my, if you leave 23 to the end, they're gonna go, they're gone.
Right.
So we've been bringing it down and for a soft landing here.
There's also been, I've heard, since some of you we're sitting on COVID money. We're not. We have obligated all of our funds. We will have spent down all of our COVID money in the timeframe that was allotted, because we still have several large HVAC projects. And we've spent
Yep.
millions of dollars on HVAC. We've done half our schools on air quality control.
It was interesting, Dr. Bergens mentioned that notes from what we're seeing out of Richmond is schools are gonna have to start justifying if they've got more than 20% of their funds unspent. They might have to start turning it back over to the state so they can get it spent down within the federal guidelines. And so that's making a lot of people that have not been spending it down quickly a little bit nervous. And there's still a lot of money out there. I could talk macroeconomics on that, but that's outside what we need to talk on here and my concerns there. But we are in good shape. The TJ and Goodview project with the 600,000 we only have, there were like 6 different COVID buckets we got. We only got 1 left, ESSER 3, and we're spending that down. So we're in good shape there.
Spent down and allocated, so we're in real good shape, right?
Technical adjustments, I know that's, you could say that's miscellaneous, whatever. I'm touching a lot of line items on there. I'm adjusting for actual insurance participation. I'm adjusting for actual salaries. A lot of different adjustments, things going up and down on there. I'm not adjusting line items that were like, I'll just say, line items like professional development, stuff like that. I'm not going to that. I'm really looking at electrical, fuel, and things that are have-tos and making adjustments and participation in health insurance. The big movers on what you're seeing there for the 484, I like to list the big movers and what caused that. Fuel, 240,000 increase. Back in December, I was thinking it was gonna be closer to 600,000 or 700,000. thank you for the bid. So that came down quite a bit, or we'd be even more stressed on this budget if the fuel rates were still where they were. And school resource officers, the county's gonna bill me next year for the quarter that we have to pay. I put in 200,000. They haven't hired them all, but I need to have some money in the budget to pay that out. I don't know if I'm gonna have to pay all that out next year, but I wanted to put something to make sure that I had money to pay into the county for that quarter that we're responsible for next year.
Have we heard any more on the state possibly pushing those dollars out?
Now, I'll let you know when I
So we'll
hear.
lose it this year? Is that what
It was 100% covered this year, so there was nothing we had to pay out this year. Next year, it goes to 25% we have to pay.
right, but since we didn't use that 100% of 14 SROs, we were hoping to roll some of that money over.
We're helping the state, that would put that over to next year, so we could still pull on that. As of now, we haven't heard anything on that. So I think there's 2 or 3 that are hired now that are probably pulling from the 100%. 2 or 3 wouldn't cost 200, but if he continues to hire, I need to have enough in there. So I took a guess on that, on how much that would be to make sure we're covered. So those are the 2 big movers on the technical adjustments. What's not listed there, but I'll go ahead and tell the board, we're having a very good year on our health insurance. You know, our reserves have gone up in the bank count. You know, our consultants are always conservative because they will forecast that you're looking at your rates and you still have 5 months left. So they're gonna put a factor in there that it could come in worse. But even with that, I think where we're looking at it and talking to my consultants, at this point, I would recommend, and I think February was even a better month, no increase in our health insurance next year. So the board doesn't have to pick up anything. And in the past, we kind of came up with a metric that if there's increase in premiums, maybe employees pick up 20%, we pick up 80. It's not a given, it's not written in stone, but kind of a split to say that it can't always be on the school board to pick up all the cost. And I just gotta give credit to our employees. I mean, our wellness plan and all of that, just kind of looking at what they're doing and just really, we're knocked it out of the park this year. So high dollar claims are the biggest driving factor of a health plan, and we're just having a very, very good year this year. So pleased to report that.
So I'm hearing 0% impact to employees on.
Health insurance,
On
yes,
health
sir.
insurance, okay.
Yep. And also for,
Last year it was a what?
we went up 5% last year,
Okay.
Which was the first time in several years.
first time in like 4 years. So we had 4 years, no increases, 5%, no increase this year. So I think we're running a lot better than most companies. And I give the credit to our employees in the wellness plan and really watching over the health and making sure they're taking care of things.
Great majority of companies see an increase every year.
Yeah.
I mean, so basically to hold it flat for 5 is pretty incredible.
I'll take it.
We'll take it.
So it's not something you have to struggle with this year. And our reserves are, we got plenty of reserves that if we had a bad year, you don't have to overreact with a huge increase. You can say, okay, bad year, we might have to go up, but you don't have to go up as much as maybe under fully. So, down below, the federal, we're getting into revenues on the operating fund. I've already spoken to the federal dollars. Commonwealth, that's just a net change. Some of that is for, you know, the bonus going away, but some of that's for basic aid, some of that's in sales tax, and some of that is for, you know, the salary increase. So that's up and down going across, but that's the net impact from the state going into the operating fund, $3.3 million at this point. As Dr. Bergen said, we're hoping for better. The difference between the state, between the Senate and the House, for us only, is about $3.2 million. So if we got the Senate, we get $3.2 million more. If we got the House, we probably get a little bit more than this, but not as much. So you can see that there's there's bigger things that they're discussing that just don't impact schools, but a large part of that does impact schools. So we'll
Does
see
that
where that's going.
number, Mr. Hagler, does that number include the error that the state made?
I fixed,
took that
I
out.
took the correction on,
Okay.
yeah. So when we first looked at this, there was 1.5 million more, and then the state had an error in their calculation, so I had to back that out and correct that. So this does have that correction. Or we would have gotten it next year, and I was like, wait, the cash isn't looking like I thought it was coming in. What's happening here? And then I would have gone to you guys and said, there's 1.5 million not coming in. Okay, and they did hold us harmless for this year. So this year's taken care of, don't have to worry about that correction. Local transfer to textbook and maintenance. Dr. Bergen spoke to this. This is $600,000 that we're cutting out of our operating and moving into our maintenance reserve fund to prepare for reversion. And then we're also taking another $100,000 out of here and put it into textbook. Spoke about textbook, I think last year, that we had to start putting more local money aside, because when adoptions come, you have to have the money to do the adoption. In years past, a lot of the adoptions were actual textbooks. Now they're textbooks and digital. So if you don't adopt, all your digital content goes away immediately. So we gotta make sure our textbook fund, just like our maintenance fund, and just like we replace buses, that we're putting money aside. I anticipate we'll have to do this maybe 1 or 2 more years, and then our textbook fund will probably be good. With about we did 100,000 last year, another 100,000. If we get up to about 400,000, we won't have to continue to increase that indefinitely in the future. But this is cutting money out of operating, put it in the textbook to make sure we can do those, and we have no surprises in the future when that comes. And then there's just really one on that other. And I know this was talked about the other night, but when we got the buses, one of the buses came with we got 2 electric buses. One grant paid it directly to our supplier. The other one had to flow through me. So I received the money in and then I paid it out. I built it into the budget. So I'm removing the revenue and the expenditure. It's a net zero effect on the budget. But I just wanted to, I have to reflect it in the numbers there. So the expenses are going down by that amount, and so is the revenue. That is the operating fund. As you can see, it's mostly in the, up there in the salaries and some reductions, and some minor technical adjustments. But that is what bounces out. There's nothing really else in the operating budget. So I'll stop talking and see if there's any questions on any of those line items. And that goes back to actually with how we led off with the staffing standards and balancing this budget.
Any questions for Mr. Hagler at this point?
I do have a general question. So operating fund summary, where does professional development, where does that fall?
It's under the instruction major category.
Okay. And so instruction major category, but it all flows into operations, is
Yes,
that
sir.
right? Okay.
Yep.
So my question is where can we go see what dollars we're spending on professional development?
Sure. It's a detailed budget. You all have this?
We do.
Okay, let me see if I can find the line item.
What page are you on?
I'll, give me a second, I'll let you know. You don't have our codes memorized?
I wasn't due till next week.
It's quite daunting, I know. It's
There's
like, what do those
professional-
codes mean?
I think there's professional development on 51.
It's under, and that's under a subcategory, so you've got the major category instruction. Under there, we have a lot of the classroom stuff, special education. And as, that on page, I think it is, you're right, 51. That is, improvement of instruction category. And you can see that there's money for professional improvement allocated out to the schools. But if you go down to the bottom of that page, that is a local line item, $209,000, professional development for the division.
Right.
And Dr. Calvert can speak to that. If you go further down, I just wanna make sure I point out all the lines here. Tuition assistant program, helping people, get their finishing degrees, $30,000 there. Conference travel, $62,000. And there's some that is specifically for vocational, we have to program in for the state along with Carl Perkins. That's specifically to that. And I'll say the internal travel is not really professional development, that's for people using their own cars to travel between schools or interim staff that have to travel multiple schools like OTPTs, psychologists, or speech paths. So those are the primary. There are other dollars in Title II, Title I, Title IV. There's other title grants that you have to build professional, but that's title money you have to build in when we do those. But those are the local dollars.
If I'm looking at this correctly, 209,000 is what we're spending on professional development as a division.
That takes care of all departments. Yeah.
So,
That includes, you can do some tuition reimbursement through Title II, some you cannot, so it includes, tuition reimbursement. We pretty much give everyone at least $1,000 a year back in tuition reimbursement. So a lot of that comes out. All of your, math conferences that the schools attend, principals conferences, FLAVA conferences, everything like that comes out of it. They apply and the application goes to Dr. Weiss and it has to show how it meets the school goals, the division goals, it has to be approved. But like I said, a lot of it is also tuition reimbursement. We have special programs for example, we had to get several librarians certified. So we did agreements with those librarians to do multiple classes, not just $1,000 a year, to make sure they got certified. We also have programs with ECSE teachers to get them certified, some SOL adaptive teachers to get them certified, that we're paying more money to get those certifications.
so.
So it's a
Dr. Helen, is
wide
it like
range of
specific-
everything.
So is there like 3 professional development classes that we give the entire division? Or is it solely based on each individual employee's?
Mostly, it's based on each individual employee's needs. There are certain things that are paid through division lines, like sometimes we do reading instruction, Chris training, some of the big ticket items like that are paid through that.
So 203,000 is what we spent last year, or this year,
That was
That's what's in there.
last year.
2021-22, yes, sir.
Okay. Alright. So just, I'd like to, and I don't know if it's a presentation or if it's just a, hey, here's what we covered last year, here's some of the class, or not some, but here's what our employees took.
Okay, we
In
got it.
professional. I'd just like to know what it was, what was the subject, what was it that it was covered.
Okay, and it has to be, we make sure that it's, like a vetted, you have a list, and like when you're going through Title II, all those things are vetted to make sure they're solid instructional practices. So you do all that within that, so, but we have a list of everything.
Ms. Harrison?
Yes, Dr. Calvert, does the division of professional improvement include any executive teams, professional activity, going to various conferences or anything like that? Or is that a separate line item? Or is it under here?
I think most of it, am I correct, Randy?
Most of it's in this line.
Okay.
There is a travel line that's I guess it's the division, the internal travel line, that's mostly used for other things.
Trying to capture all the professional development, most of it's right here. We even tapped this line I went down and spoke with the bus garage. I've spoken to Mr. Cash's department maintenance. If people are pursuing different additional licensing, certifications that are beneficial to us,
Yeah.
we're gonna help them.
Yeah, and we should.
I wanna further their career. Is there risk that they leave us? Yes, but I'd rather invest in my employees and give a nice work environment and they stay with us.
Absolutely.
So yeah, other departments are tapping into that line too.
All right, and then from an operating fund, Newsela, I know we've had some conversation around that. Where does that type of resource fall into the budget?
Typically textbook,
Okay,
that's where we've kind of kept an amount in textbook that we pull that from since it's a resource. Sometimes we'll cover it in instructional if we don't feel like we have enough in our textbook. But we actually decreased that amount based on usage last year, and we're gonna make a few more decreases this year so that the resources we're providing are strong, but we're also making sure schools are using them. And if they're not using them, we're cutting them out.
okay.
So when you get in, it's a good point, when you get into software, under the technology sub-major category, There's a software line there with a lot of money in there. But we're trying to keep content and textbooks. There might be a small dollar thing that comes through for materials and instruction, but the bigger purchases for content related or textbook, everything computer and software related, the business systems, the student information system, all that is under the technology. So you're not gonna see content under technology.
So do we have a list of what we're paying for in that?
In the textbook?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so can we get that as well?
And that's also where we pay for all of our off-campus textbooks for dual enrollment, STEM Academy, CVGS, RVGS. And because they're college courses, they change a lot. So,
And I'm looking at that textbook fund and what are we typically spending every year without an adoption? So I factor that in and I factor adoption years in, and Dr. Woodford and I work together projecting what we're gonna need for the next 7 years.
Okay.
That's why we're trying to adjust some of those, but we can get that list to you.
Okay, thank you.
Which kind of went down to the next fund, which is a textbook fund below. We're getting a substantial state increase, $26,000 to the textbook fund, and then that's the $100,000 going in that I spoke about earlier to increase that textbook fund. That fund rolls over each year, that money's available to us, and we accumulate, and then it comes down. Nutrition fund. That's a crapshoot sometimes. It's what's happening on the federal side, local side. And so I factored in the changes that are happening on the, because we took the salary increases and applied it to the nutrition fund too. All the nutrition employees are under that fund. They're not under operating. And so applied that and had a modest increase to accommodate that. We'll see how the rest of the
Majority of it, Randy,
What's that?
salary increases, that 110,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. I have to look back, there might have been a technical adjustment in there and stuff for health and dental and some other things and salary changeover. But really with the federal money coming in, and also with us, and what's happening there, but we're trying to spend down our fund too. So I have to back out a lot of the expenditures for higher price items that we're replacing right now because the state's requiring us to spend down that fund. And we have a lot of replacement things that we're doing. I think that information was shared with, I'm on 2 committees now. Was it the facility committee or the finance committee? We provided a list. Thank you. Susan Quisberry provided a list on how we're gonna spend that money down and justify it to the state. So we brought that to the committee. That was a request by them.
Did we get any funds from any of the equipment that we sold that was still good, that, you know?
We'll put that out, all that equipment, if we don't think we can sell it, get scrapped and we get money for scrap
Okay.
on the metal. Otherwise, we'll put it on govdeals.com. Is it GovDeals?
Yeah, Gov.
I think it's not. And that's an auction site. Anybody can buy it.
Alright,
So if anybody's interested, go on and look.
Yeah.
We got some 1964 cars that'll be on there. No.
Thanks anyway, trying to quit.
And finally, the maintenance fund, where you see some big changes there. The biggest decrease in there, I was trying to project how much we were gonna spend in COVID funds there last year. Some of that got postponed. We haven't spent it all. But the big majority is spent down, so you'll see a big decrease on the federal side. That's all COVID related going in there. So the revenue's going down and the expenditures are going down. State, they had a one-time 3.3 million going in there last year. So we'll receive that and then it goes down to 0 next year unless something comes through with the, with state. You can see the 600,000 that we're shifting over into there from the operating. And then the county's 500,000 that Dr. Bergen spoke to at the beginning going into there. So, yes,
Our long-term thinking for that, you know, you're replacing a lot of HVAC.
Yep.
We're gonna need to do that. I know we've talked about that and you said it's gonna have to end up being, long-term, it's gonna be a transfer from, more transfers from operating.
yes, sir.
How do we foresee that working? I think I brought up, is it a certain percentage? I think you brought up a number of like $5 million or something like that a year or
I'm
something.
working on that, but if you know, when we get into the CIP plan, you can almost see that our backlog of things that we would project for the next 5 years is about 5 million a year. Some years less, some years more. I'll have a whole detailed plan for the next 20 or 30 years. I'm I'll get to that and present that to the board and saying, for our major equipment that has to be replaced when it gets into life.
Right.
You know, is it 25, is it, 30 years, roofs, HVACs, boilers, heating equipment, things like that. Let's get a replacement cycle, and then we can kind of really get a gauge on what are the things we have to replace each and every year. And what does that really take? I think it's gonna be in the $3 to $5 million range, I imagine. I think just like we're dealing with reversion here, eventually we'll have to build up to that. Hopefully there may be some state money coming in by that time for that. They used to have money in the budget when I first got here for that type of stuff, and that got gutted during the recession, it never came back. So we're hopeful for that. There is, for some projects and stuff, there's sometimes some grant money we can go after. There's a grant out there right now. Once the board kind of tells me direction on the CIP later, I can go after some grant money for one of those projects, and I will. Deadline's the 31st of March, so I have to get that in. So I need some direction on that. So I want to go after that money. But yes, sir, I think it's going to be a combination to get that 5 million. Does the locality help us out and give us a little bit more? Does the state give us more? Do we get anything from the federal? And then we would have to put money aside for that.
We have to build in a realistic
We're gonna have to build
expectation. If
something
we get
in.
more, fantastic, but
I think if you're asking me long-term, this is me, it's a big lift with the SROs and reversion
yeah.
of what we're setting aside the next 5 years. To add on top of that, to get that to the 5,000 level in 5 years, I think is a really, maybe too much. But as we go through, if there's extra money and stuff, put some extra money aside so that when we get to year 30 or after 5 years and that all goes away into there, that we can starting to build that back up. It may take 4 or 5 years after that to get it up to that level. And we got a lot of HVAC, so maybe those 4 or 5 years are a grace period that we don't have a lot to do, but we can build it up and maybe get there. So that would be my guidance. Some might wanna do it quicker, later. It's just where do you feel comfortable? That'd probably be my guidance. I think, I have spoken to the county and even with some of their board members. Yeah, I'm very hopeful that there's some seed money to start there after reversion. I know there's money going to the town that they're not gonna have to do, so that's hopefully 750 that could just say, okay, we'll start giving that to you, that's seed money, but you're gonna have to do some of the lift. But it'd be nice to get a start off on that and start building from that.
It's good to hear that we're thinking ahead.
I'm thinking about it.
Your wheels are spinning on it.
How long will it take? And my goal in working with, I've been here 17 years, but I wanna leave it in good shape. The bus fleet's in good shape, we're taking care of the textbook, we're getting ready for reversion. How do we take care of our have-tos?
Right.
The bigger projects, other boards can fight for, but the have-tos, I wanna leave whoever takes over for me in a good shape that we've already got it set aside. It's kinda like, okay, cut out all your bus fleet for 2 years and don't replace it. You're setting yourself up for a big fail. And if I could go back 10, 15 years, we were gutting $4 or $5 million out of our budget 3 or 4 years in a row. It was brutal. We didn't put anything into maintenance. And we've been building back in the operating, getting our staffing levels down and doing a lot in the operating. Probably should have given a little bit more attention to maintenance over those years, I'll be honest. But we gutted so much and we're just hopeful to get back some in operating. And so it's time to give attention, you can't just keep ignoring it. Yeah, so that would be my guidance to the board.
Cool, thank you.
So Randy, I'm gonna ask, in your professional opinion, are we putting enough in maintenance this year?
So if I look out and I did the calculation, at reversion, at the end of reversion, about 7.8 million, based upon the budget this year, I'll recalculate that every year. If we stay, if the 500 and the 600 continues to go in, we got that. We'll be good.
And that allows
and
us
so-
to maintain at a $5 million per year.
Oh, no, if you wanna get it back up to 5 million, you'd have to figure in the next 5 years, you'd have to cut another million out of our budget. So we'd be putting 1.6 million aside this year, 1.6 next year, to get to 5 million after reversion.
And that's my point. I mean, so we're gonna talk about CIP in a minute, and that's great. We can go get these new projects. How do we pay for it? The other maintenance that needs to be done, and I've heard you several times say, we need to be preparing for $5 million a year to fund these projects. These, just maintenance, not projects, maintenance. And so it makes me a little nervous that we're not putting more toward those dollars.
It's a balance, I'll be honest, agreed. But to put more aside, what do we cut? If there's not more revenue, you gotta make other cuts, and it's gotta come out of operating.
I mean.
And I know that's painful,
Yeah.
but if you want, and you just asked me, if you wanna be at $5 million in the maintenance fund, you'd have to cut another $1 million out of this budget and put it over there, cause you're gonna have to do that each of the next 5 years. So you would be cutting 1.6 million out each of the next 5 years, to get there. The 600 to take care of reversion, another $1 million. To me, that's a pretty big lift, but to say that more should go there, yeah, I'd love to see more go there. We either cut or we hope for more from the state. If we get a lot more from the state, we can take care of some of the other things the board wanted and we were saying. I would guide, a lot of that should go into there, so we're moving ahead. Yes, sir, I think we approach each year like that.
And that's why I wanted to hear what you had to say on that, so to me, we don't.
I'm not an economist, but I think all of us know, I don't know what you do in a year of a recession where the state cuts us money. Cause then you're going, do you give a step? 600,000, SROs, maintenance, but we're already having to cut $1 million because the state cut us $1 million. That's where we were in 2009, 10, and 11. And that's not a fun. So at least we got money to spend this year. It should be a pretty good budget, so I'm happy about that. Maybe not everything, but I don't wanna go back to those other years. And, but we do need a plan ahead, yes, sir.
Yeah, if I can, unless there are more questions, maybe a segue over to the next conversation. I'm proud of the board and administration for having a plan. Last year, when we developed a preliminary budget, we weren't setting anything aside until we realized we were having, there were more revenue available that came through the amendment of the budget. And we made a decision to put $200,000 aside of that new revenue last year. This year, based upon the skinny budget, we're putting another $600,000, that's $800,000 aside. When the budget is finalized from the state, we'll go back and to finalize a budget and talk about all the priorities of the board. This is another priority, right? Is that a higher priority than finishing the compensation study? Is that a higher priority than middle school sports? Is that a higher priority than paying for dual enrollment in AP? Is that a higher priority than expanding on workplace development coursework? So, balancing it out, we could put more money aside, Mr. Hill. And I know several of you, we asked Dr. Mealy to collect input from all of you about the development of the budget. And she gave us the data. And there were individual members, I'm not speaking for you, but I'm repeating what I believe you said. There were some members who wanted to do more than 600,000, to Mr. Hill's point. And we might be able to do that when we know, when we are not flying blind, because, we have a skinny budget. Randy has been able to present this balanced budget with the information on hand. We've been able to meet all those priorities with what I consider to be the least common denominator. I do believe we'll have more state funding to work with. It's just the devil's in the details, because if the $1,000 bonus gets worked in there, and what is the language around that? We need to have a clearer picture, and then we'll come back through the Budget and Finance Committee and we'll say, what's the next priority? Do you want to put more money aside for reversion over other priorities?
If I could, just to clarify, because I did make the statement about past budgets and going through all this thing with reversion. Just want to be respectful for previous administration. There was a plan. It's no longer there, so I'm not gonna go back and revisit it, but there was a plan that had identified that at the end of reversion, the county had identified about 4.5 million that could flow over to us. That was out us doing any of the lift. That's gone, it's no longer there, I'm not gonna argue that point. But that was our assumption for 5 years. That's why money didn't start flowing in until a little bit later. And so it wasn't neglected all, like it's never gonna happen. Oh, and the calculation back then is a $6 million difference. It's gone up because of how much more money we're getting in our local composite index. So it wasn't neglected entirely, but when it shifted, then it started being addressed in a different way. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's unfortunate, but that's where we are now.
So, Madam Chair, would you like to segue over to the CIP, or do we want to? I know there was a comment made about, I don't want to talk about staffing standards, so we talk about budget. Do you want to put a bow on budget, or?
I want to ask a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
You made earlier about expand CTE, electrical and cybersecurity.
Yes.
So that's in your budget.
Yes,
So when our students leave, are they going to have an associate's degree in those two studies or a certification? How does that work?
separate but related. Not all CTE courses are at dual enrollment for dual enrollment credit, but certification for sure. So HVAC students, when they finish the HVAC program, will be certified as an HVAC electrician.
I'm asking about electrical and cybersecurity.
So we won't know until we get a teacher, because it's dual enrollment is based on the teacher's credentials.
Okay.
So they have to meet the dual enrollment credentialing that the college gives. So, if they have enough, graduate hours in their certification area, then they would consider them for dual enrollment. But they'll definitely be certified, but we don't know about dual enrollment until we actually hire somebody. And is that,
Well, you'll get a certificate for electrical, but you won't be certified
Right.
until you take the test for the state.
Right, right.
Driver's license.
right,
that
But they'll be
applies for-
prepared to do that.
right,
Okay.
right.
And location of those, do we have that settled?
At this time, we're talking about doing it at Gibson,
Okay, both?
both.
Okay.
The first year of the cybersecurity, we could probably do it with one teacher, and then next year we would need two teachers. Part of the issue is we have to build in the equipment and a separate network from our own, because we don't wanna teach our kids to hack into our own network, so. Yeah, so the equipment we would wanna have based at Gibson, so it's for everybody.
All right, and then we said no payment for dual enrollment or AP classes for those that are in our buildings. So early college is not included at this time, so it's just in our buildings. So I had asked for some pricing to be done on not only early college, but also dual enrollment. Have we started that?
Dr. Trosper and I both have reached out to our contacts at the, first of all, I've reached out to CVCC to see if they were considering not charging for dual enrollment inside our schools, and they're gonna get back to me. And we've reached out to Liberty University, University of Lynchburg, Randolph, and right now that's the ones we were able to get in touch with. They're looking into it and getting back to us. It may take us a little bit longer to get, because they're in their budgets and trying to commit to tuitions and things like that also, so.
Okay.
If we get any relief from CVCC, or if we can negotiate something cheaper, then when we go back to our final budget, I'll show an expenditure decrease on that. So as we get that data, we may be able to come back and save some money. Excuse me.
And move it to maintenance.
I got somebody, yes. But I gotta fight them for, no, I'm
I
kidding.
got you.
Can I ask one quick question before you go? And Dr. Woodford, just to kind of piggyback off what you just said about checking with the other higher institutions. And you said, see, you said all Lynchburg-based schools. Why don't, is just because of the distance that we don't check with Virginia Western?
So Virginia Western is not part of our community college. So the community college they're assigned to regions. So our regional community college is Central Virginia Community College. So there is an agreement in the state that high schools work with their regional community college, which would be CVCC.
And State River just, because they are closer to Lynchburg. So
Well,
they
and
just automatically fall under the blanket of having to come to Lynchburg to CVCC.
Well, that's why we do the early college in Bedford, so
Yeah.
our kids can come to a central location. Now, CVCC does certify our dual enrollment teachers in all three high schools, so our employees teaching dual enrollment, they are under the guidance of CVCC and the approval of CVCC, and that's where we get that credit.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then, as far as the employee study last year, who did not receive funding of,
I've got that.
okay,
Started with secretaries.
I have it there. So we were working, we restored all teachers, and then we started working from the bottom, the lowest paid up. The next group that would receive a restoration would be our clerical staff. Next to that, the next grouping that we broke out would be maintenance and bus garage for those that were frozen during that time. After that, it would be support staff, and I'd say support is mainly like psychologists, speech, OT, PT, nurses, support staff. And then the last would be any administrator.
IT's in there somewhere.
IT would be with support, the support staff.
I think.
Yeah. I could move them, but, and so we just,
But we did bus drivers, we did custodians. and-
paraprofessionals,
Paraprofessionals.
nutrition
Last
workers, all received it last year, and teachers.
But the list you just gave me are the ones that are left that we
Yes,
have
sir.
not touched. Okay, perfect, thank you. All right, that's all I have.
And I do a different I do a new calculation every year what that costs, because as people leave, they weren't here when we were frozen. So over time,
It's gonna
it gets cheaper and cheaper.
Okay.
Just to give you round numbers, it was like $130,000 for clerical, 45 maintenance and garage, health, I'd say health, all those, 115, technology, I'd say around 60, and then administration was about 150.
Mr. Daniels?
I have some, I guess, general questions. Back to the dual enrollment, where is that in the budget here? I'm looking on page 25, and last year, or this year was $400,000, next year is $400,000. Located somewhere different, picking up that cost.
So with the dual enrollment right now, the way it works out right now, we have not there's no new change with CVCC. The change was I reduced the revenue coming in from the kids.
Okay.
We still, the way CVC does, I pay the entire bill, they send me 75% back.
Gotcha.
Okay,
So
got that.
that's why, it used to be, they want to see the whole money come in, and then on the revenue side, you'll see a big portion coming back from CVCC. What I eliminated was the 25% we're collecting from kids.
Okay. I think a lot of these questions have to do with, I guess they're instruction questions. On the first page, there's several big numbers that tend to stand out, so I'll just ask them and maybe you guys can take them one at a time.
Which page, sir?
Can you-
Page 11, I guess, of this big handout.
Do you have that, Karen?
What's on the front?
Major categories?
It's major categories, 11.
Categories, so we have classroom instruction, I guess is down. Is that because of, that was COVID funds?
I had the entire bonus built into there, so 1.6 flowed out of there.
All right, great. Media services is up 245,000, 16%.
Some of that was what Mrs. Calvert spoke to, Dr. Calvert spoke to, so that's up, but also we're looking at, when I said Mrs., I said sorry, Dr. Calvert. Also, when I'm doing true-ups and stuff, there's times where I'm looking at it, and to be honest, I'm capturing it at a moment in time and doing some true-ups and technical adjustments. If there happened to be a vacancy, I might have missed that, so I'm truing it up to where it should be there.
Would that be the same thing for psychological and office of principal?
Yes, sir.
All right. On the same packet, page 26, says salaries aid. It's up 145,000, which is almost 400% increase.
Okay.
I'm just looking for what
Yes,
that
the
is.
alternative education materials, that's the line item that we're paying our Virtual Virginia out of. I had not budgeted for that in expenditures last year, I have to put that in, so whatever distant learning program we use, whether it's Virtual Virginia or maybe we're looking into another one, it would come, it's alternative education, it comes out of that line, it's really a purchase services, we just pay a vendor to do that distant learning.
All right. We'll just
So
keep
that was a correction of something that was not in the budget that needed to be in.
Okay. Page 27, middle, let me see. Salaries for middle sped is down 239, is that people leaving?
Not necessarily, so when you look at middle school, this is just the complication in the system. The state, I have to report to the state, elementary and secondary. Elementary is kindergarten through 7th grade. Secondary is 8th through 12th. So I have to take all of my middle school, all of my staff and kind of split it. And so changes that are happening there, and I'm trying to nail that. So, no, we're not really decreasing any staff
I
there.
didn't think so.
But it's
I was
also a
myself.
true up that if there's less middle school sped staff, then she may have gone down a little bit on that because of the caseloads in the school.
Got
So there
it.
might this is me doing some true ups. This is my technical adjustments on salaries.
Right, and that would probably be the same thing on page 28 for speech.
28 for which one?
Yeah, we had the contract on speech.
You got it. I might have the wrong page, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, you're
But
right.
yeah, that's
No, 28.
You're right.
We couldn't find teachers, so we were contracting out for a while.
Under our sped, our purchase services under sped is a lot, we're paying out for those speech because we just can't find people to do that.
okay. And then we're gonna go all the way to 52. Libraries, I think we answered that question earlier. Library salaries, right?
Yes.
For doing that.
Yes, most of that
Okay.
is for taking care of those positions we talked about in the salary.
I
So
think there's
if
library
that didn't
aides
make it in,
somewhere.
then that would go down, yes, sir.
Okay. I think that's it.
Any more questions? You know, Dr. Bergen, before we move on to the CIP portion, you said that you needed two things from us this evening.
Yes, ma'am. So we need to communicate our ask to the Board of Supervisors. So Mr. Hiss, when he's developing the county budget and the Board of Supervisors are considering their budget, they need to know what we're asking for. So we're not proposing to the Budget and Finance Committee of asking for more, other than the level of funding that we received this year, plus our standing agreement, another $500,000 towards reversion. So that's what we're prepared to communicate on behalf of the board if you all are approving of that. We just don't, we're calling this a preliminary budget, but we need to take action on this, knowing we're gonna come back and revisit the budget when we have a clearer picture on our state funding.
So you're asking for a motion to take it to the county as prepared.
Can I just check in with Randy? So do we need to communicate through Mr. Hess to Board of Supervisors that this board has taken action on a preliminary budget in its totality?
So I'll tell you, it's been done in the past, but I don't think it has to be done that way. So I think the law says that we have to communicate what we're asking for to the county. Could be on a slip of paper, it doesn't have to be this. In the past, we've adopted a preliminary budget, knowing we're gonna come back and change it. So if the board adopted this, we'd come back to another work session. If nothing changed and none of the revenues changed, you can still come back and make modifications. So you could say we adopt the preliminary as is, and that would tell us, then we'd send over this sheet saying this is our ask and kind of communicate that, and we'd speak to that. If it's just a flat out number, we'll speak to it when we go over there. So it's the pleasure of the board. It's nicer when you got it's nicer when you got a nice document, but sometimes you do that and then people are saying, well, you agreed to this, and it's like, no, we're gonna go back to it, so I know where you are there. So we need to go over with an ask.
Well, here's a question then. Do we need to look at these staffing standards again before we approve the budget?
I would say this, and I hear Dr. Calvert saying this. If you approve this, we're gonna go over with the ask with no new money for the operating, the 500 over to there, and that's our ask. You can come back and do that later, but I think it would greatly help the board, help the staff, that regardless of what money we get from the state, if the board is passionate to make changes to staffing standards that they just can't live with, when we get the new state funds, the executive staff will work to get that in somehow, some way, or come back to you and say, hey, we gotta cut something else. But it would give us guidance. Dr. Bergen, I'll defer to you on that, but I think if there's just anything in here you can't live with, that you say, no matter if you have to cut some, if it was $0 coming in from the state and you were so passionate about something in staffing standards, you would tell us, go back and cut somewhere else to get it in. I think we'd like to know that, and I'll defer to Dr. Bergen on that.
Yeah, 85% of our budget salary and benefits, and so that's determined by our standards. So our standards have not changed from our current year,
Except for the
other than
multi-grade.
the parts that we highlight,
Multi-grade.
the parts we highlight.
Yeah, and
I can't look at that.
no, I don't want that there.
I think Dr. Calvert would add one more thing to that.
We would like to be able to give the principals their FTE count, even if it was close, because they have to start forming their master schedules. And it is March. They have to start hiring. So we need to give them something.
So could we look at this from a consensus point of view? Or for the staffing state, to give you guidance, that way we're not tied into?
I'm processing your question. I mean, when the budget is finalized, the staffing standards are a part of the budget, and they're published with the budget. So what I'm asking is, are you in agreement with the standards as presented? And if not, how would you like to modify them? Because these are your standards.
So do
I'm
we need a
open to
motion
anything
or?
you wanna
And
change.
how do you want us to do that, by consensus?
Why don't we, well, I think, I haven't heard any discussion or dissent or concern from the board about things in black that are current standards. We just talked about the things in red. So if you just wanna go through them as we talked about them earlier and just see if we have consensus on each of those changes, like, maybe we start with multi-grade. And see where the board is on multi-grade. I'm good, I just want direction, folks. If you never, ever want us to have multi-grade, then let's write it into the standards. If you're open to use it when you have to, but as a last resort, let's write that into the standard. Right now, we have nothing in the standard about multi-grade. So I just want direction.
Okay, well then, can we just go around the table and see what people think from
I'm
there?
gonna defer to you, this is a board decision.
Okay, let's do that. So we'll do it one at a time. Start off with the multi-grade classrooms. Mr. Daniels.
I'm having a lot of heartburn with this one, quite honestly. I can see both sides. I honestly really do not know what to do. I would like to not have to do it. I would like the staff and the principals to be able to figure out if they think that they need to. Maybe it doesn't necessarily happen this year, but as Mr. Hagler said, we might be up against some budget issues in the next coming years. We would have to be able to adopt. Obviously, we could change that. But I don't know. I really, I'm at a loss for figuring out what to do here.
What if we put a grade level in there? This can only be used in these certain grade levels and that's it.
I mean, could we
Just
set
third and
different
fourth grade.
guidelines even for that to say we can do it, but it's gotta be this very specific reason to do it, or this, could we
So-
set some rules up for that?
What do we do
Getting
now,
really-
since we don't have that option? What happens in this situation now?
We do not have multi-grade classrooms.
We hired 3 more for Otter River.
And
And
we
we
use,
use CARES money.
we use the federal
And we
COVID
use
money to
federal
do that.
COVID money.
And we, that's running out.
And
We still got classroom sizes that are 27 stuff, very few, but we do.
Very, and
Still
Mr.
has
Helms, this is
Otter
just
River.
elementary.
Yeah,
And in our Title I
So
schools,
if you wanted
it's
to,
where you find
you know,
those
we've already
options.
stated it wouldn't be for kindergarten,
correct.
right? So it would be only when necessary in grades 1 through 5.
Okay.
That's all we're talking about.
Okay, so Mr. Daniels, you're still on the fence. How do you feel, Mr. Nelms?
I mean, with two people having experience seeing it fail, I have to go no.
Okay, so we have a no. Mr. Hill?
I say give the staff a tool, and I'll say yes for multi-grade classrooms.
Okay, and I've taken a stand and I stand by my stand and absolutely not. Mr. Holbrook?
Well, I would have to say, I'd say yes, but like you said, it should be an absolute last resort.
I'm with you, absolutely not.
Not.
So we have 4 for not.
Okay? So we'll write into the standard what our current practice is, which is multi-grade classrooms shall not be used in Bedford County Public Schools. And we'll work within those parameters. Say again, Leah?
We'll have to add positions.
We'll have to add positions into the budget.
Costs money.
So we'll have to cut somewhere else. I mean, there is the possibility of using COVID money next year, but if that's the long-term position, if there weren't COVID money next year, by adding that in, we have to cut somewhere else in the budget to get that in. And I would, looking at what we've done this year, 5 or 6 positions is probably what we have to
So
build.
it's either add positions or raise the standards, are the two options, besides this.
If we say you can't have that, then in the schools that are struggling and there's no way to configure it and we have to add teachers, we'll have to go hire teachers to do that. So it's 5 or 6 positions is what we saw, I believe,
It's a
Karen.
prediction, it can
It's a
change year
prediction.
to year.
I just have to guess and, but you've got to build something. You can't assume that there's not gonna be any because there were some this year.
Right.
And that's, we figure about 65,000 per teacher all in.
We've made it work before, I think we
Okay,
can keep on making it work.
Absolutely. You find other ways, innovative ways in which to make it work, but
Okay.
this is our students, and the impact of multi-grade classroom is devastating. It's devastating to those students. It does not
Since this is,
work.
since this is
And
a
the
staffing
teachers,
standard and
yes.
the
It's
board's willing to
devastating
do
to the
that,
staff.
any additional state funding would go to this first. That's how I would read, because the staffing standards have to be implemented as the board has.
So would that be outside of what we're approving as dollars tonight?
Yes,
Then that, I'm not okay with that, because we're not approving that. We're approving as it's written based on dollars and not asking for additional funding.
correct.
So that would need to come back to this board to approve if we're adding positions.
What this board is saying is,
We don't
they want
have
those
to-
standards, so when you come back with an amended budget,
Okay?
if we have no more state money, we gotta go find $325,000 cuts for 5 positions. If we get more state funding, that money would be applied to that first. That's how I'm interpreting what, if you approve that in there right now.
We voted on it, let's move on.
Yes, we have voted.
I mean, I know we voted, but we can still understand.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
if it comes back.
I'm trying to relate
Yeah.
how I'm interpreting this vote, and anybody that voted for it to stay, and I wanna make sure that that's what we're
understand.
voting. Okay,
We understand.
Okay, moving on to the library media specialist. Mr. Daniels, do you agree with this?
Yeah.
Mr. Nelms? Ms. Hill?
Yeah.
Yes.
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 School counselor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
No offense, Mr. Nelms, Ms. Johnson getting here.
No, I'm fine.
When she's doing the minutes. Okay, moving on to K. 1 part-time equivalent, 0.7 full-time FTE teaching position for every 25.75 part-time student. Average daily membership rounded up to the nearest full 1 FTE. Part-time students are defined as those students attending the following programs: early college, CV, GC, RBGS, SGGS, TC, and STEM.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes. Yes.
I'll make them all black.
Now move on to consensus of whether or not to move forward with this budget, correct?
So, say that one more time, please.
Make consensus to move forward with this budget here is presented?
This preliminary budget
Preliminary
as
budget.
presented,
Okay.
fully knowing it's going to change. We have an unclear state
Yeah.
revenue picture.
Yeah, over the years, this first work session's always just kind of been your wish list.
Sure.
The real work comes when we find out what the money is. So since we're just doing this by consensus, how do you feel, Ms. Harrison? Are you okay with this?
I am okay with it.
Yes. Mr. Holbrook?
yes.
Make sure I understand, we're not asking for any additional funding
From the county,
from the county.
other than the $500,000 add to the maintenance reserve fund.
Yes, I'm good with that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, moving on to the CIP portion.
All right, so, this, the Board of Supervisors have communicated to us through the leadership, and maybe to some of you through one-on-one, that they would like us to think about what we are really wanting them to do in the next 5 years as they consider their real estate assessment, and where they're gonna set real estate. They had a presentation from an external consultant, Davenport, that said, you know, here are some options for how they can fund CIP needs by the school and by the county. If you look at this sheet that Mr. Hagler has created for you, you can see if we, first of all, Mr. Hagler has broken it down into improvement projects versus maintenance projects. right? So this list, you'll see are improvements. We'd like to add a gymnasium, we'd like to renovate a building, we'd like to replace the bus garage, we'd like to renovate the auditorium, we'd like to replace the canopies. If you flip it over on the backside, you see, also listed on the capital improvement, but they're maintenance things. They're primarily roofs and HVACs. So he's calculated for you over the next 5 years, looking at the backside, how much money are the have-tos, we'll call it. And they total, as you see on the back, 35 million over the next 5 years. But we have a plan in place as we're setting money aside and they're setting money aside to fund almost all of that, right, Mr. Hack? I think it's 32 of the 35 million that we anticipate.
Yes, on the back sheet, trying to give you, and speaking to that, it was my goal to give a better understanding of the board, those have-tos, and, you know, and the additions. And that way I can build that out way into the future too, and provide that for whoever falls behind and when things need to be slotted. But on the final page, you'll see a 0 for project costs. Well, when the board as the board goes through and kind of ranks those and makes a decision on what they want to ask the county for, that number will go up, it'll feed in there, and I'll do that, you know, on my spreadsheet here. The reoccurring cost of 35. Current cash on hand, not allocated to any existing projects, estimated at about 5.6 million. 27.5 million in the next 5 years that will be accumulated between what we're putting aside and the county putting aside. That can be spent on CIP. That comes up to about 33 million. So you can see it's almost there for that bottom portion, that there's enough funding with cash on hand and what we're putting aside to almost pay for everything there on the bottom. And a lot of those things on the bottom are really, a lot of those are catch-up, things that have been deferred that we're catching up on. So those can be moved around, those can be moved on or off. But I tried to be true to the previous document the board had approved and put almost all the projects that were on there on this document, so that those could be moved around. And once again, the ones on the bottom could be moved to different years. But we just kind of slotted them out based upon how many projects we might be able to handle in a given year and kind of bundle them together, so.
So that's if we have it like in 2 conversations, we can have more detailed conversation about what we're calling the have-tos. But I'd like to start with the want-tos, which is, you know, this list that currently adds up to 133.9, if we did them all. So Madam Chair, it was my sense, you might have the same sense, that the Board of Supervisors would like us to bring a pared down number. What I think someone would call it a package. You know, how much are we asking for the Board of Supervisors to assist in these improvements? We've talked a lot about auditoriums and office and about a gymnasium for Bedford Primary. So Mr. Hagler has created this, so it's an Excel spreadsheet that through the magic of Excel, this middle column, as we move things over and identify them as priorities, we'll get the bottom number. So can we pull that up on the screen?
The static document I can.
Were we prepared to pull this up on the screen, Barry? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put
It's
you
a
on the spot.
PDF, but it's not gonna be dynamic, it's
The
just an
one that
Excel.
Oh, I'm
says-
sorry, it's not gonna be
5
dynamic.
year-
all have a copy.
But, yeah, we
Yeah,
can,
we all have a copy right here.
Okay, all good,
He's done.
all good. So
but I'm
So-
working here.
Mrs. Kirby, if you could lead us through about, you know, of these items listed here, can we find some consensus about, let's say, maybe the first 5, that, you know, there's consensus on, there's 5 of these, and then we would see what that totaled, and then we can continue on and we can pick a 6th and a 7th and an 8th, and we can just see how big the package gets. Does that make sense?
It does.
It does. And I'd asked everyone to come prepared with your top 5 choices. And I'm under the assumption, of course, I know what they say about assuming, but is everyone's choices on this list, your top 5 choices?
Yes.
Yes.
So, what is gonna be the best way to do this? So that way we can figure out which one will have the most. So, yeah, I'm thinking going,
Tally.
we'll tally mark. Tally mark.
Just go down the list.
Okay.
Can I say something before we start? Are we gonna take, for example, the awnings at both Sand River and Liberty?
Make it a
We
package.
wanna take that as a package I think we should,
I
I
think
think that
we
should count
should.
as one tick mark, I
That
guess.
should count as one, especially something that we're gonna do at both schools. I think they need to stay together, so
Also-
that way we don't
Is
have
that
what we had
okay?
before.
I would say on the right-hand side, I put the options, because we had recent studies done on auditorium and the canopies. So not only is that a project, but which option,
Okay.
repair, partially replace, or full replacement, and so
And
those are on
then,
the right.
before we go too much further, also too, in the CIP that's online, we had two different phases for the auditoriums. You had auditorium,
I think that was the previous committee or administration trying to just spread out the money and how it's gonna flow. I think what this board needs to do are, these are the projects. It's up for the county to figure out how to fund it, whether it's fund balance, borrow, or whatever fund that they take it out of. And that's for them to wrestle with how they do that. I mean, I wanna know before I bid a project out that I got the full amount for the project. So I put it, I don't know how, it may be over a 2-year period, but these would be the projects we'd go after.
okay, so looking at this, like what Mr. Daniels just said, are we in agreement that we're gonna look at these, like the canopies as a package deal with both schools, or did you wanna look at them individually?
Package is fine.
Package is fine? Okay, so we have two separate items here, we have Liberty and Stanton River canopies. So we'll combine both of those into canopies as opposed to having to go through two separate ones.
And that'll be new construction.
New construction.
Yes.
Then the auditoriums, are we gonna break those up individually or
I think it's a package.
package? Okay,
You know which category would that fall under?
The middle one.
That's what
Renovation
I
and
would
addition.
Well, that was our suggestion. Again, we need the board's guidance. Based on my observations of your discussions, I felt like you had already come to consensus that you wanted to remove the existing canopies and put new canopies in place, so we put the high dollar figure in as a planning number. We haven't had a detailed discussion about auditoriums. We presented them, but, you know, we can renovate them, which means replace the seats and upgrade them, make them look nicer, but no new brick and mortar, no green space, no storage space. New construction would be knock down the existing one and put a new one up. Middle of the road is add some brick and mortar to create some practice space, some storage space, some green rooms, and replace all the seating and the lighting and the carpeting and enhance them. So we are assuming the middle, but the board could guide us and say, no, we're fine with just renovating, or we want a brand new one. So
Yeah, the middle would be awesome.
middle, okay. Then, with the canopies, does that include the sidewalks, or is the sidewalk something separate that should have been on here?
I think there was sidewalk repair included in the,
Sidewalk repair was included in the canopies?
I would say this, these are estimates
I know,
until we bid it out, so,
Yeah, I'm well
I
aware,
think,
but I'm just
I
making
think
sure
we
that we
actually
didn't-
put some, I'll have to go back and look, but I think there was some lighting, that was an optional thing they put on there. I think we'll just, might as well get it right when we do it, so
Yes.
we'll put the lighting in there too,
Okay.
and we'll bid it out.
With all these projects, with the bids and the estimates, are we assuming any sort of contingency, like 10% above and beyond, or are we?
I think with the canopies in the auditorium, they built in some contingency. The other ones are our best guesses. We haven't done more of a detailed analysis, but when we go forward, I would say when we go forward, I'd like you to rank these. Because the way you do it is, you go out for bid and you go down, and if they come in higher, the last one, we'll have to wait for more money or do something on, or scale back the project, because you're gonna go in order about how the boards rank these based upon the money you have available, so, yes.
Okay,
There will be contingencies built in, and when we bring the bids to the board, usually there's a contingency built in for any kind of change orders or anything like that, and we'll include all the costs, including the engineering and architectural, and that's gonna be part of the project.
I think we just go board member, and we pick our top 5 and we just start checking things off and we see where we're at.
well, keep a tally,
Yeah,
alright,
just
keep a
do
tally,
tally,
what's the
starting
top
at the
5 are?
top.
Okay, what about you, Mr. Daniels?
All right, so first on the list will be the awnings for Liberty and Stanton River. Number 2 would be the auditoriums for Liberty and Stanton River. Number 3 on my list is the primary, the Bedford Primary Gym. I'd like to see the bus garage because I think we can utilize that with CTE and maybe Susie G and working on diesel engine. And then number 5 would be an expansion at New London. That's my top 5.
Okay, now expansion, is that included in the renovation? Or is that something
That's
else?
Where it's there, New London
That
Medium
is a renovation?
Yeah,
That's
renovation.
That's not adding any more space to New London, that's just a renovation.
That's just a renovation, so you're fine with just a renovation, or you're asking for expansion? You say expansion.
I misspoke.
Okay. Okay, those are your top 5. Mr. Nelms, your top 5.
All top 4 are his, but, the
Well,
last
oh, okay, canopies,
canopies,
auditorium,
auditorium,
gym,
gym, bus garage.
garage, okay.
And like you said, I'd love to partner up with Wicked Diesel as well to kind of, since they've had this new apprenticeship program, I like to see that implemented in there. And then after speaking with some of the kids at Stan River today, the athletic improvements is my fifth
Okay.
one.
Mr. Hill?
Canopies, auditoriums, Bedford Primary Gym, bus garage.
Hang on. I just lost it, where was it? There it is, okay.
Which one were you on?
Bus garage,
Alright, and then, athletic improvements.
Mr. Holbrook?
Awnings, auditorium, gym at Bedford Primary, bus garage, and the athletic improvements.
Okay. Dr. Mealy?
Auditoriums, gym, canopies, bus garage, and, I'm really torn on the last one. I think the Huddleston renovation.
Ms. Harrison?
Awnings, auditoriums, Bedford Primary School's gym. And that's music to my ears to be able to say that.
Mine too. I've been trying for 7 years.
Bus garage, most definitely. And I'm torn here. But I'm gonna go with athletic improvements.
And of course, my 5 will be the canopies, the auditoriums, the gym, definitely, the bus garage, it's 4, and then athletic improvements. So those are our top 5. So we're looking at, who's got a calculator handy, because my brain is not right.
Right now.
217,
He's
972.
got
How
it.
much?
Well, I'm sorry, I included the 5-year maintenance shortfall on the second page.
Yeah.
So I've got 38,217,972.
Okay.
Did I calculate that right, Mr. Hagan?
Well, I'm calculating on the top, all the projects are, is it 37.6? Is that right? 7.6, 9.8, oh, wrong one, sorry. See, did the wrong one.
Let's go see.
33.8 million on the top, and the ask is gonna be, I got the additional need is 36,417,000. So it's 33 plus the 35 is 69 overall, minus the 33 we've got available, 36. I'll double check my formula.
Mr. Heigl, could you say that one more time, please?
I'll print it out for everybody and I'll make sure. I'm just double checking the numbers so we do that right. I mean, the overall ask, we wouldn't do it to specific, but like, we rounded up to like 37 million that we'd be asking for.
Now, how are we on our debt service at this point?
Debt service is all on the county side, used to be on our budget, but they have it all. I would say there's no substantial reduction on our debt service for another 4 or 5 years. It's all around 7.5 million debt service on interest and payments, and then you'll start seeing it go down some, in bigger chunks after, it's like the 29, 30 year, I believe, last time I looked. But once again, I think with Davenport presenting to the county, they were looking at debt service, tax rate, available funds, and so they would have to if we were asking for this, they'd have to flow that in and say, how does that work over the next 5 years? Because I think they did a 10-year analysis, this is like over the next 5 years. I think the board would say, okay, we're gonna give you this amount over 10 years, we take it, and we'd split out the projects when we were gonna get them done. So they'll kind of give us guidance on that, but these are the top projects, and how does that fit into their financials, and how can they fund that? Because they're pulling from different pots when funding something like this. So have a different number there?
Yes.
What do you got? 38 what?
217,972.
7.8, 3.2, 5.9, 3.3, 7.6.
No, I used the estimated cost. That's in that.
The column, the first column?
You have the 33.8 on the top?
Let's see here.
Randy, I came up with 33.8, but that would not include the gymnasium at the primary school. But I'm doing with a pen in my hand. 2 canopies, 2 auditoriums, a bus garage, athletic improvements, and a gymnasium.
You know
I
what,
get
you put
35
the canopies as one stuff, you're right.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
came up with 35.
38.2,
So-
yep, you're right,
Here's the question.
my fault.
Yes, ma'am.
If we do the turf at Liberty and Stanton River, then of course, we're picking up the maintenance of that. So in fairness, we would be picking up the maintenance at JF too, that they're paying for themselves. What is that cost that we'll be picking up into maintenance if we put turf at
We'll have to
Liberty
get new
and Stanton?
estimates on what it, you know, you have to pull the whole turf up, when is it due to be replaced? But that would have to go, the turf fields would then go down to the bottom, and they have to be, we would take ownership and we would take care of them over, if it's every 5, 6, 7, 8
It's
years.
supposed to be 10 to 12.
10 to 12, I will build that in, just like with HVACs, and when those need to be done. So,
And they told us at the time it was 300,000 to 400,000, but I'm sure that's increased
Per
yeah.
field?
Just like everything
Yeah.
else.
to replace, yes. It was originally like $1 million to build, but it would be 3 to 4 to replace, but that was a long time ago.
so it is 38, apologize for that.
No problem.
Well, and has a request been submitted of what the 7,600,000
I was gonna ask the same question.
for athletic improvements? I mean, I didn't assume that was only 2 locations.
No, those included, I think the committee, I'm taking from what the committee had, there was one big number.
Turf was.
There's details from each school. For instance, JF was not asking for new turf, but they were asking for other things to be done.
Okay.
And so each school had different things. I think they all wanted bleachers.
Yes.
There were 2 turf fields, but it might have been a field house at JF. So they all had a list of something,
I just
so.
wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I was assuming that
Probably-
all
yeah, it's probably
3.
the press.
Yeah, well, but I just asked about turf field, because I
Yeah.
knew those were the only 2 that
Okay.
It's
didn't
an
have.
overall improvement, we can bring the details of what was asked for there, but,
Perfect.
yeah.
Now, this 1.8 for the gym, I like that number a lot better than what was there before.
What was in there before, and just one clarity thing, if you had selected any renovations, I put a little asterisk there that there's have-tos down below, but they're also in renovations. If you had picked a renovation, then I could eliminate something down below in the next 5 years. But yes, the Bedford primary was a renovation and a gym all mixed into one number, so I broke it out. So it's
Okay.
just, the gym was 1.8 when I went back and looked at that study.
So, can I ask a question of the board then? So I could have, you landed where we thought you would, based on the conversations we've had, publicly. I would like us to go to communicate and ask, and Mr. Hiss has asked us to communicate and ask for the whole package. What are we hoping for? If we said everything, it's 133 million. We prioritized 5 things and we came up somewhere, shy of 40 million, 38,
38,
38.
38
Is that the ask you want? Or do you want any of these renovations? We have no renovations on any of the schools listed. Do you want to say, well, if we had a 6th or a 7th, we'd like to renovate a couple of the schools. We'd like to make I'm gonna use round numbers, we'd like a $60 million ask. We'd like half of 130.
It was my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, maybe some of you know, I thought they wanted us to do like for the next 5 years or so.
Yeah. They've asked for our priorities. We arbitrarily said 5. It could be 6, it could be 7, it could be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I say we add a couple in there to ask, I mean, might as well.
Well, then we also have
The maintenance
the
is funded.
maintenance part of it.
That's funded,
That is funded.
based on what we're doing.
We're just asking
Well-
for project money, basically.
Well, then I'll be honest with you, and of course, I'm gonna keep on harping on this till I'm blue in the face. And it wasn't on this list, it was on the long-term CIP previously, but it's not now. Liberty High School is the only high school in the county with only 3 tennis courts as opposed to 6 at the other 2 schools. And there is a matching grant from USTA right now that we would only have to pay half of it. I mean, I hate to let that money go to the side and not use it before that grant runs out. So like for that, to me, that's a priority.
Yes.
So we're looking at Liberty tennis courts, 3 additional courts at Liberty
Yes.
for a 6th priority.
And also Susie G, with it being historical, we need to look at grants on that as well, as far as fixing that masonry. And I mean, if it does need some roof improvements, maybe the grant will take care of all of it at one time.
The thing, and I'm still winding up the grant for
Yeah.
historical building across the street, we're still waiting for that to finalize. A lot of paperwork on that. Not to say that that's not worth going after.
Right.
But the idea behind historical grants are, they give you extra money because the project's gonna cost more to maintain it with historical type architecture. So instead of you going in there and going with newer construction, they want you to go back and use older type things to make it look like it is. That increases the project cost, and that's where the grant is trying to do that. It's just not like, here's money. They want you to do it a certain way, so it increases the overall cost. I just wanna be forthright with that, so.
So Mrs. Kirby, I heard consensus on athletic improvements. So we can determine a ballpark, what we think it would cost to put 3 more tennis courts in and increase that athletic improvement total.
Okay.
In the back, right? What I'm asking
Yes.
is,
Good idea.
does the board in this moment in time want to consider any building renovations? Because this is the time
Is
to introduce it in the
yes,
conversation.
And I think we need to think about our 4 schools are near capacity. And we either need to add on, build, but we've gotta have some room. I mean, another subdivision was just approved last week, when Dr. Mealy and Ms. Kirby and myself were sitting in there. So we've gotta think about where do we add on or where do we build? But there needs to be some discussion, and do we lump that into a renovation / addition at one of the elementary schools? But we need to do something in Forest from a capacity standpoint. And that's
I
gonna
don't-
be a big ticket item.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, but I'm also concerned about all these other renovations in schools that we've neglected for years.
Let's just ask them for the
So-
133 then.
That's what I was thinking.
But
Well,
Go for the whole thing, huh?
how
all
would
we can
be,
say
I
is
mean,
I
no.
think it's important to let them know where we stand.
Yeah, this is what we're looking at,
I
yeah.
think if it was, come up with your top 5, you say, these are our top 5. However, long-term thinking, we have these other issues that we
Right.
wanna make sure that you're aware of, and we're gonna have to do something there, at least get them forward-thinking on that as well.
And-
Let them know that we are being forward-thinking, but these are our immediate, these are our top 5, that's what we should, I believe that's what our ask should be.
And I think the message needs to be clear that that also includes us funding maintenance
Yes.
for the next 5 years. That
Yeah.
Yeah.
that is important for them to understand that we're funding the maintenance.
Got that.
Can I ask, if they don't approve all the money, or how we're gonna bid these out, I'd love to have the board rank the order they'd like us to do these in. Because if the money comes in, you don't have to go back and say, which one do we take off? We'll go down the list based upon which one you should be done first, second. I don't know if you wanna do that tonight, but it would give us an idea of,
I think we
But-
if we start working on any
Well,
design, we know which
We
one
had
to
a
do first.
four-way tie for first. So, I mean, cause we had a four-way tie with Bedford Primary Gym, the bus garage, the canopies and the auditoriums.
Those are the top four then.
Those are our top four.
Canopies first?
Canopies first,
Auditoriums too.
Auditoriums.
auditorium second,
Okay,
gym third.
Yeah.
Are we so far okay?
I'm good.
I'm just checking with everybody
Oh, I'm
else
sorry.
here. Are we still good?
I'm saying I'm good.
I'm obviously outvoted, but I do think auditoriums and gym directly impact our educational programs and the ability to provide those educational programs. And I do not say in any breath that the canopies are not absolutely necessary, but they're not necessary to the educational program.
They're
So-
not, when you can, till you consider kids walking around
Yeah, but
around
that-
mold,
well,
that's making them sick.
You know, well,
It could make them sick. I'm not
yeah,
saying
it
they are
could,
making.
it could. I just think that auditoriums and the gym directly impact the educational program that we're providing.
But we're still at the point of,
We're on number 4.
we're on number 4, so that would be,
Bus garage.
that's bus garage. Okay, then 5 was
Athletic
the athletic
improvements.
improvements.
That helps us, thank you. I mean, at least for the maintenance staff, that we can start, if we're hopeful, engaging and starting to get some design work and stuff done.
And before you go, for clarification to them, that it does include all of it. But well, the canopies
present-
include both schools. Now, how are we gonna do, I didn't see this on the maintenance, and is this something that we need to put into what we're asking? But the heating loop at Stanton River, I know was out, and then we have the drain field issue.
I've already accounted for that.
So that's already
So
taken care
that's
of?
not on here as an ask, but I already have money set aside. Projects that are bid and already in progress, I've adjusted available cash for those projects.
Okay,
Well,
So-
while the board's here, I don't know if you wanna go over any of the things on the bottom or not.
So the money that was showing up that we have in CIP, that everyone says that we have, is committed already out to other things that
A
we.
lot of it is, but as I showed on that final sheet, there's 5.6 that's there, that I would say is available cash. But that can be used over the next 5 years for all the stuff on the bottom. So yes, if somebody said you had money for canopies, yes, we do, but we'd have to move some of those things off of the next 5 years in order to do
And
that.
not do maintenance.
Right, and so,
We'd have to defer maintenance, yes.
right, and that's what's gotten us in this predicament in the first
Exactly.
place, so we can't
Exactly.
avoid maintenance anymore.
So I think we need to talk about either some type of addition or something enforced from an elementary standpoint.
The New London Academy, definitely.
I mean, and if it's New London renovation / expansion, but there needs to be some dollars mentioned.
I guess we need to look where we got the most room for an addition.
There's TJ.
You mean there needs to be another line on here, so it's in our radar?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And then separately, we should be mentioning it to the board of supervisors, let them know that.
Well, I would add it in as a line, because I like this
Yeah.
entire document.
Oh.
Maybe I'll tweak it a little bit, so they can see what is not on the ask, but is on our radar. And I think that's what
Yeah, I
you're
like
alluding to.
that.
Yeah.
And this is gonna get the dirty look, but you shouldn't be surprised, you know I'm not gonna support that, to always support redistricting. Move some of the kids.
I would
You
point
would-
you in the direction of your board of supervisors to recruit families and children to your zone.
Well, you know,
Instead of
but, yeah, I
busing our
don't wanna,
kids an hour and a half every day. So,
I don't wanna, well, I'm just saying,
I hear you.
okay. So, anything further?
I just have to ask one more time, so, and I'm good with whatever the answer is. The ask that I'm gonna communicate on your behalf with Mr. Hagler is just shy of $40 million. There's no appetite from the board of asking for anything higher
Well-
than that and prioritizing a renovation of any of the schools
Well-
listed here.
But here's, how do we show? Mr. Cash, good thing you're here. Cause we have multiple schools here listed needing renovation. in your opinion. And I understand what Mr. Hill is saying too. Which one is the greatest need?
I'd say if you look at them just in terms of age and ADA accessibility, Stewartsville will probably jump out.
Well, I don't think we should dump 17 million into a school from 1912. We should put that money towards a new school or adding on to Goodview, I would think.
Well, actually, Stewartsville's a better built school than Goodview. It'll be standing long after Goodview is dust, just because of the way they built things back then.
Yeah.
It's a very sound, solid building.
Okay, so which one would you put in behind Stewartsville? What would be your second one?
I would probably look at Stanton River Middle.
And I'm not putting you on the spot, and if you don't wanna answer, it's fine. I understand,
Exactly what she's doing there.
Stewartsville, the ADA compliance, I understand the ADA compliance. But why would Stewartsville rank above, Stanton River Middle rank above the other ones?
Stanton River Middle, I think, has similar renovation needs just from an HVAC perspective, also from a learning environment. I think there's some challenges there with that.
That building, we've had discussions on this. You could look at, we've added on to buildings. And so when you look at how old is a building, when was it renovated? You go back when it was originally built, was it renovated? When was the addition done? And you just get different dates all over the place. So yeah, when you look at Stewartsville, it's probably not as old as some of the other buildings. But from a building standpoint and how it was built, we see more needs there. I'll just put it mildly like that, that probably wasn't built as soundly as the others, and there's some needs in there in the core facilities. So it gets into where, do you go for the oldest, the biggest need, the expansion in the forest zone or to the school? So I think Mr. Cash is, I think there needs to be a lot more discussion on this amongst the board on why. And, you know, you look at it, age, when was it renovated, and what's the future of that building, long-term, and expansion needed. I think all those have to come in just in age. And Mr. Cash is just answering from, if I put my eyes on it, this is what I'm seeing. And I think there's other factors that come into that.
I would like to take care of all of these, but I know asking for basically $134 million.
Why can't we say, Madam Chairman, that there's our top 5 and that here are the rest, and we're gonna work toward eventually ranking those as well, so that they are on the radar.
But then what number would we go to them and ask for an ask, or to ask to keep some of potentially?
Mr. Hess has asked me to give him a number.
Yeah, and
Is
that's
it
where
38,
we're
is it
at.
60? What is the number that we're asking for? We can and do and will have more conversation about this school, that school. But are we done with the ask?
So more than likely, if you ask for 60, you'll get 40.
Yeah, so I say ask for 38.
I mean, there's two ways to approach it. You can go push this number up. They're all watching. They know the conversation we're having. But you be more realistic and say, the actual needs right now is $38,217,000. We've identified them for you. They need to be publicly stated in our request of, here's what we're asking for in funding, the locations and the projects. Also, be aware, there's another $90 million that we're probably going to be identifying to you. But for now, our ask is $38,200,000. That is what we need today to go do some of these $130 million worth of projects. And to me, that is a very small percentage of the overall need.
And it makes us, to me, this list is, you're looking years and years and years out there. So let's look into the near future, and then when we get maybe even halfway through those, add something else to it. So that gives the board enough time to go visit, talk some more, Mr. Cash can help, Mr. Hagler, and we can get more information to make a more reasonable decision about expanding something in Forest versus a renovation someplace else, to make a more reasonable decision. I don't think that's a decision we really have enough information to make tonight.
With that being said, I just thought of something else I wanted to essentially ask while we're talking about this part of it. We had the motion that died regarding paving the parking lots. Was that because of Huddleston parking lot, or would it die for both of them? Cause Liberty really needs to be paved. I
I
mean, we-
disagree 100%. I
Can
drove
it be
out there, I don't see,
resurfaced?
maybe,
Huh?
maybe
Can it
be
be
sealed, it's sealed and painted, but it definitely does not be,
You're looking at a fraction of the cost.
Liberty doesn't need to be.
I drove all around it, in the back.
I would
Well,
disagree.
my husband, I spent 3 days
I would
out there
disagree,
waiting.
And I would agree with you, Mrs. Kirby, that Liberty High School needs to have that pavement
Yeah,
completed.
cause I mean, I hate for that parking lot to look so bad and then we're putting all this money into everything else looking good.
Well, I think another thing is, Mr. Hagler, was that brought up because that's part of
That
an
was-
ongoing
that was recurring.
maintenance, a recurring
Those
expense
were
so that
slotted
we,
in. I apologize to the board. Yep.
so that we could maintain that so it didn't crumble and we'd have to dig it up and replace it, you know,
Yeah,
the
just
cost
like
be
with the
more.
HVACs and everything down below, we'll get the maximum amount of life out of everything we can. We haven't done much paving in a long time. And so this was just a prior priority from the previous list or the committee and stuff that those were slotted for 23. So we started working on them. And I set money aside for them and said, let's start making some dents into some of this stuff because there'll be another paving next year and there'll be paving further out. So, yeah, if you push things off, does it absolutely have to be done this year? Maybe, maybe not, but you wanna get to them eventually that you got a replacement cycle
That's how we
for your
got-
paving.
Yeah, that we are.
Yeah, we were
By
putting
doing
this
that.
shit
So,
off.
fix stuff that ain't broke either. That's how we got in this hole, you know, as well, spending money that we don't, you know.
I'm just saying,
I'm just
if-
telling
I
you,
mean,
I-
if there's a few patches in the ground that need to be repaired, you cold patch them and then you reseal the parking lot and you restripe it. You don't repave it. Cause the pavement's probably good, it just needs reseal, and when's the last time it's been resealed? Probably 12 years ago?
It's been a long time. Yeah, there are some cracks at Liberty High School that we were concerned about. And when we prioritized all of our paving needs across the county, we kind of came up that Liberty High School and Huddleston were the biggest needs. Huddleston particularly, the area behind the building, the loading dock area of Huddleston.
And a coal patch is just that, it's a patch. It doesn't last, you know, very long at all. Even if you
Depends on how it's
reseal it.
done.
Well, even, say we do have to get it done, I think the three people that bid on it are the largest, most expensive paving companies, period. And I think we, you know, need to revisit how these things get bid on. Is there a site that these people go on? How people get notified about this? You know,
There's
how
a
to bid on it, when to bid on it?
There's two, we post it on our website.
Okay.
We send it out to vendors we know that do it, and then I also post on the state website, and that goes out to, and I say paving, and it goes out to a lot of vendors. So we can repost, we can repost with a modified, you know, bid. I was just trying to knock things out that were already slotted
I
for
get it.
23, so,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
But if we were to patch, reseal, and then paint, what kind of pricing is that? I'm sure it's not $312,000.
oh, we can look into, I imagine it's gonna be less than that, but we can look into that and see.
Can we get 3 parking lots done versus 1?
Patched.
What's that?
I said patched though, you know, I don't wanna get into a position where.
When you reseal it, it lasts 5 years, if it's done correctly.
I mean, the road driving over there
That's
was
not a
rough
long
shape.
time.
I think we need to really give some credence to what Mr. Cash has shared with us. I mean, his team has gone out, they've evaluated it, and they've now given us a recommendation and they've ranked it. So we at least should consider the time that those experts have put into evaluating it and coming up with this decision that it needs to be paid.
And we did, and we voted on it, and it was enough.
Well, we didn't vote,
She's
because
just-
motion
And she brought
died.
it back up again.
The motion didn't die, so there was no vote.
It died
Well,
because
it
it wasn't.
didn't die, well, it died, but we can't bring it back up.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So that's why I brought it back up,
Exactly.
so.
I'll just say this, in the document listed below, and we'll work through the facility committee on all this. Some projects that are bigger are listed specifically, but if you look down towards the bottom, we have a contingency for things that might break unexpectedly, and I think that's wise. Does it always have to stay at 500,000? If we go 3 or 4 years and we're not dipping into that, I'll bring that down and we can free that money up for other things. So that's just working through the facility committee and this whole board on how you're putting money aside. But right above that, I got school maintenance, painting, parking, duct cleaning. I know there's some discussion on that, but one year we might not do any painting, any paving, we might do a lot of painting. And it's just putting that money towards some of these things and getting those done during the summer when we have those months to do. So we can work through the committee on the paving, and it died, so we'll go back to the committee and talk to them and see what we wanna do. If we wanna do it differently, we can bring that back. And, I had set money aside for those, cause it was in progress. So, we can go back and revisit that.
Can you, is there any way you can get an estimate just on resealing,
Yeah.
Huddleston
Yeah,
and?
we'll get that and bring
Liberty?
it to the committee.
Just, I mean, just a cost comparison, just.
If I can just add, there is a portion of Huddleston that we're not gonna be able to reseal, that
Okay, so it
pavement has
would,
totally failed
gotcha.
in a portion of that lot.
So that's where you cut and
That's
you
in the
pave.
back.
Yeah.
The loading dock area.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Cash, for all your work.
Anything further?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Not for me.
Anybody else?
We didn't have a lot of discussion. I know we already, the second page, we've slotted things. We'll work through the committee on these. Adjust as we can and stuff, but you know, that would be our guidance to go forward with some of the stuff. If the money's available, we'll start working on these and slotting them for next year, in the 24 year. And that's how we approach these, that they're in the next 5-year plan, and this is how we slotted them, and we'll approach them that way.
Okay.
Okay, anything further? So looking at the agenda, we've already done the approval 3.01, did that by consensus. So now we're at 4.01, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Chairman.
I have a motion by Dr. Mealy, do I have a second? Second by Mr. Nelms, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.